This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. Thank you for choosing LBC this morning. Two stories that speak to the very heart of our society, really, draw our attention. The suggestion from Brian Levison, that's Sir Brian Levison to you, that jury trials could be dispensed with. Thousands of cases could be decided by judges alone. That goes back to Magna Carta, doesn't it? Did she die in vain? And also the latest ballot among resident doctors, the artists formerly known as junior doctors, which has just squeaked over the line of support needed for industrial action. And by squeaked over the line, I dig into detail. By that I mean that they were just over the threshold. I think they had 55% turnout and they need 50% turnout in order to have a sort of mandate for strike action. But of the 55% who voted, 90% voted in favour of strike action. I find it very hard to oppose industrial action taken by doctors. I have my own mantra playing in my head at the moment, and that mantra is, if you support every single strike ever called, you are almost as daft as the bozos who are diametrically opposed to every single strike ever called. They are people who could be loosely described as turkeys voting for Christmas. It's a little bit like the poor people who are opposed to a wealth tax. It makes very little sense intellectually, but somehow emotionally it packs quite a punch. Why, as a worker, would you be opposed to the exercise of workers' rights? I should make a list, shouldn't I, of seminal moments in my own so-called political awakening. But I've mentioned one of them to you before, and it wasn't actually industrial action per se. It was the exercise or the element that prompted some industrial action. I forget which public sector grouping it was. It may have been firefighters who were taking industrial action over changes to their terms and conditions, including their pension rights. And this is back when I used to accept the pittance that they offer you to go and review the papers on the telly. Times were hard, don't judge me. And I was sitting next to someone older than me, someone I knew, someone I quite liked, one of those columnists that has plied their trade in various different outlets, and perhaps inevitably for that generation of journalists has subsequently gone completely crackers and can be seen on a little watch television station near you, punting the, what we once would have called far-right talking points of the moment. But they thought that it was a valid argument to point out that many people in the private sector had had their pension provision filleted by essentially greedy owners, greedy bosses, the hoarders, if you like, of wealth. And therefore, people in the public sector shouldn't expect to hold on to theirs. And I've had a few moments like that in my life, and rarely have they actually resonated quite so long. I mean, 20-something years later, I find myself still marvelling at the boneheaded idiocy of that position. The turkeys voting for Christmas element of that argument. It is as if I got mugged yesterday and would therefore be calling for you to be mugged today. That is the logic. That is the ineluctable logic of arguing that because some people have been treated badly, nobody should expect to be treated well. Because X got hurt yesterday and has no protections, Y, who doesn't want to get hurt today and has some protections, should have those protections immediately taken away. I am, however, conscious of the fact that if you are in support of all industrial action, then you're almost as daft as the people who are against all industrial action. And somewhere between those two positions, there will emerge by 11 o'clock today a cohesive opinion. But I haven't got one at the moment. I've got an emotional opinion. And my emotional opinion is, not now, lads. Not now, lads. And indeed, lasses. And by that, I sort of mean, well, two things occur to me. One is OBR reports today about the parlous mess that we still find ourselves in. 14 years of austerity plus Boris Johnson's handling of COVID plus Liz Truss equals disaster that nobody can unravel in a year. And the OBR has pointed out that the country remains very much committed to living beyond its means. God, we're rolling through the greatest hits, aren't we, today? We've got that 23-year-old anecdote about sitting in the Sky News studio and just staring goggle-eyed at someone arguing that because they got mugged yesterday, you should be mugged tomorrow. And now we find out, and we got the old mantra about industrial action and support and opposition. And now we find ourselves heading headlong towards another one, because you can have detail. I mean, how much of your opinion about industrial action is based upon the detail? Did you know, for example, that there's dispute over whether the BMA should be using the consumer price index or the retail price index when calculating where their wages are now in relation to where they were then? And did you know that there's dispute over when the when should be? The 2008 comparison date that the BMA has picked is relatively arbitrary. If they were to compare to 2015, then using CPI, their own, not the measure they prefer, but it would actually have gone up. So the numbers are negotiable, malleable, interpreted. And that's reason number one why I'm worried about whether or not I should be letting my feelings override the facts. Reason number two is that a year ago, almost to the day, the co-chairman of the then Junior Doctors Committee of the British Medical Association told colleagues that the next window of opportunity for strikes is about 12 months away. This came shortly after the government announced, the new government, the Labour government, announced a deal with junior doctors for a 22% pay rise to end the industrial action, which saw, if memory serves, about 1.2 million operations get cancelled / postponed. The waiting lists have actually come down a bit in the course of the last year. There are several oil tankers that this government needs to turn around, and that one has just started tacking in the right direction. They'll undo that immediately with more industrial action, but that is not an argument-ending position. And what this chap Lawrenson, who's no longer in the post, said was that we need to wait until the honeymoon period, his words not mine, of the next Labour government, of the current Labour government, was over. He sent this message to colleagues on WhatsApp after the deal was reached, waiting a year for the new Labour government to be weakened, and then saying that because they're utterly ruthless at the moment, I would consider striking with a low threshold for 25-26 when Labour's honeymoon period ends and they make some sort of mistake that leaves them politically vulnerable. Now, that's his job, as he would see it. His job is to get the highest possible settlement for his members. That was his job. And, you know, in a way, he's done it well. He predicted that a year from then, the government would be in a much less strong position than it appeared to be in when it waltzed into the House of Commons with that enormous majority. And he was right. And again, I'm tacking back to that sense of, if a teacher tells me they need to strike, I trust them. Why, James? Well, because I trust them with my children's lives when I drop them off in the morning. And the last big round of industrial action from teachers, my children were at state primary schools. And again, I had one of those moments where I suddenly thought, I'd listen to people on the radio and read columns in the newspapers attacking these teachers essentially as liars and untrustworthy, greedy parasites. And I think, how can you drop your children off to be looked after by these people who you portray as being so awful? I had a couple of chats with teachers at my daughter's primary school about the industrial action, about the rationale behind it, and even about how they'd voted. And I just remember thinking, even people that do what I do for a living don't seem to have realised that they're telling listeners not to trust the people that we are compelled to trust with our children's lives. That's an emotional argument with a few foundation stones of fact, isn't it? We do trust teachers with our children's lives. And if life seems like too big a reach, too strong a word, then welfare, education, future. You can't argue with any of that. Trust these people with your children, but don't trust them when they tell you that they've reached the end of their tether with regard to the terms and conditions. We trust doctors with our lives. We literally do. It's not just that they are looking after us in the way that teachers look after our children. They are often the agents of survival. They are the people to whom we turn in our hours of most desperate need. That doesn't mean that if they all turned around and said, I need £1 billion, we'd have to nod along because they're all so wonderful and altruistic. But it certainly suggests that if you're reaching for the same lazy weapons to attack doctors that you reach for whenever teachers take industrial action, or whenever anyone takes industrial action, you're ignoring, in some sense, the nature of these jobs. But here it is. That's where my heart takes me. A doctor tells me they can't carry on like this. I am minded to trust them. Then we dig into the detail, and we see the mandate is weak-ish. It's about a third of eligible doctors who appear to have voted for it. It's not ideal, is it? But that's how democracy works. You know, you can become prime minister with one vote. That's not quite true. With a majority of one in this country, the tenuousness of the vote is not relevant to the result. And the knowledge that this was planned a year ago feels to me to be a bit dodge, a bit wrong, a bit unseemly. But his job is to secure the best possible deal, or the best available deal, the best achievable deal for his members. And yet, I look at the state of the country, I look at the state of our finances, I look at all the calls, all the demands upon the Treasury, and I don't necessarily subscribe to the single suggestion, the simple suggestion that we shouldn't be spending the money on that, we should be spending it on this. I don't think MPs have suffered a similar diminishment in their pro rata pay since 2008 or since 2015, but that's not relevant. Denying MPs a pay rise would make precious little difference to the public purse. Giving doctors one would. So last time round, public support was high. I must tell you before 11 o'clock today what public support is for a wealth tax, because tuning into 90% of UK media, you would absolutely not know it. It's precisely what I told you yesterday. The people who bought you Brexit, Boris Johnson, austerity, and now telling you to vote against that, and Liz Truss, now telling you that the wealth tax is a disaster, completely ignoring the opinion of the public that they claim to care about so much and represent. But public opinion last time was on the side of the doctors, even more so on the side of the nurses. And they got 22%. And now they're asking for 29% more. And I don't think they should. Not now. It's funny, isn't it, that WhatsApp exchange I just read to you focused on chronology. Let's wait a year until they're weak and then go for them. So, and I know a lot of people won't have received a pay rise since 2010, let alone 2020, but I don't even know that that's necessarily the point. So there it is. 3 things, 3 points of this triangle that I need your help in unravelling. Point 1, if you are in support of all strikes, then you are almost as daft as the people who are opposed to all of them. Number 2, I trust doctors. I want to carry on trusting doctors. I like trusting doctors. They're not perfect, obviously, but they are a force for good in our society. And they have demonstrably had their terms and conditions diminished. The job has become measurably and obviously less attractive, but to the best of my knowledge, there's no shortage of applicants. The real problem is with people who get in and move on, and move out quite often of the country or into the private sector, but I don't know whether that keeps it there. So, point 1, you can't support them all or oppose them all without turning your brain off. Point 2, doctors deserve our support almost all of the time. Point 3, this doesn't feel like one of those times to me. Not happy with that conclusion, and I am in full pendulum mode this morning. But you tell me why I shouldn't have concluded what I have concluded. You tell me, who's the dream caller? I think this most mornings at 10 o'clock. You almost want a junior doctor who's completely across the facts, a resident doctor, forgive me, who's completely across the facts and can explain why they don't think that they and their colleagues should be going on strike. 0345 6060973, but that's biased because the other dream caller would be the junior doctor, the resident doctor, who's completely across the facts and can tell me why they categorically are in favour of going on strike. And should you shut your windows? Should this decision be made entirely independently of what's going on in the country at large? The world, if you like, that your patients inhabit is a world where money is short. And then you come back and tell, well, they found the money for the pensioners, didn't they? Winter fuel allowance, 35 grand. I just don't know. And I don't like it when I don't know, because I prefer being passionate and opinionated when it comes to the battle to properly recognise and reward our public sector, but I don't think this is the moment. 0345 6060973, and I think, as is often the case with union leaders, they may end up doing their members a grave disservice. I certainly don't want to live in a country where doctors have lost the faith of the patients, and I think this time that might be where they are leading their members and leading us. But again, here's my bias. Here's my own footballification. I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. 0345 6060973. I'd also, obviously, welcome you telling me why I'm right. Hit the numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 21 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Junior doctors leader threatens more strikes after NHS pay deal was a time exclusive at the end of January 2024. And lo and behold, 1 year later, almost to the day, junior doctors have voted for, resident doctors have voted for more strike action with a much weaker mandate, but with potentially just as profound an impact. Over 1 million procedures cancelled during the last industrial action, which will absolutely wipe out the small improvements that this government has made in reducing waiting lists. So, facts versus feelings, doctors versus patients? I'm not sure, I hope not, but where should we be? What do you think? 0345 6060973. And remember, patients, potential and actual, are just as relevant to this discussion as doctors, resident or consultant. Liz is in Winsford. Liz, what would you like to say?
I want to see if you change your mind.
Well, I don't think you're going to be able to with the quality of this phone line at the moment, Liz, but that's not your fault. I'm going to just pause you and try and... Can we sort out Liz's phone line, please, and then bring her back? Because I don't want to speak to anybody else if she's already set herself the task of making me change my mind. Let me run through a couple of texts while we improve that. Doctors, a few of you picking fault in my thing about you've got to trust them because you trust them with your life or you trust them with your children. Alex perhaps puts it best. While your argument is emotional and convincing, it's not factually correct. You can trust a teacher or a doctor's ability to do their job to the best of their ability while still questioning their political trustworthiness. And it is political. If you've been given an admittedly well-earned 22% pay rise last year, you have to offer some contrition. I prefer the word gratitude, Alex, but I don't want to police your tone, and accept that you have now been given what you deserved. Now allow the finances of the country to catch up so that the government that hopefully respects your value can offer you the well-earned pay rise later. Another 29% this year feels offensive. And while they would always have my support for their medical ability, they are not infallible, and I fear that at this moment they've made a huge mistake. Alex going further than I have so far gone, but I think heading in a similar direction. Liz, where were we? What do you want to say?
Okay, so I want to say, essentially, I don't think it comes down to what they were given last year. I think it comes down to where resident doctors are at the moment. So I've just kind of got to the end of my training. I'm going to CCT, which means I'm going to become a consultant. I'm not eligible to strike in these strikes. But I graduated from medical school in 2013. I'm going to be an A&E consultant in the next month. Wow. It's taken me 12 years to get here, and that's pretty normal. That's not even including medical school. You've got a group of people in a capitalist society that prides itself on meritocracy, and they are very intelligent, they work very hard, they work in terrible conditions, and we're looking at them and we're saying, you don't deserve to earn as much at the moment as your counterparts in other countries because you work in a socialist healthcare system. And I believe in the NHS. I believe in a socialist healthcare system.
Who's saying that?
Well, that is essentially what we're saying.
Are you sure?
When the public says,
it's perfectly possible that we are, but I mean, I understand what the words mean, but I don't know that anyone is opposed to the pay rises on the grounds that the NHS is an essentially socialist system. Otherwise, you wouldn't have got one last time.
We're opposed to it on the grounds that the government can't afford to pay their wages, which is essentially the same thing. And
I'm going to disagree with. I'm going to disagree with you on that. I'm going to dispute your diagnosis, but that's not the central point of your contribution. So carry on.
No, but then on top of that, the public will say, and I've heard it many times when I listen to your radio phone-ins, we can't afford to tax 1 or 2%
I can't
extra.
do it. Sorry, the phone line's gone again. I don't know whose fault it is. It sounds oddly enough, and again, I'm about as qualified to diagnose the problem with your phone line as I would be to diagnose one of the people that will be coming into A&E seeking your professional help next week. It sounds like you may have got a little bit of water in your phone, he says. That'll be £100. Callum's in Hull. Callum, what do you reckon?
I'm at the other end of the scale, so I'm about to start work as a resident doctor in August.
Right.
And for me, through medical
What will your starting
school,
salary be? Do you mind me asking you that question?
You can ask me that. My starting salary base pay is £36,000 a year.
So you would be rich enough not to get the winter fuel allowance if you were an old age pensioner.
Yeah, I haven't got that to worry about. And yeah, I'm leaving medical school with about, I'm just doing mortgage application. I've just checked my student debt balance, and it's at about £86,000 at the moment. And sort of what I've seen through medical school is my future profession constantly being degraded and let down by successive governments. I remember the initial strikes and the lack of respect that was given by Tory ministers.
Yes.
And now I feel like...
In contradicting the public feeling last time round, I think. I think the public were with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And now, I just wanted to illustrate that when Wes Streeting made the deal with the BMA, it was not in writing, but it was alluded to that there would be a commitment to full pay restoration across the following years. And there was
years plural.
Yeah. So no doctor's asking to go to it straight away, I don't think. Obviously, that's the ultimate demand of the BMA. But as we know, that's never the final demand. Well,
here's the problem. It's a brilliant sort of jumping off point, because a couple of things you've said are absolutely resonating with me, and a couple of things are not. And one of the things that is not is the idea that you have suffered from the contempt of successive governments. And Liz tried to separate this from what happened last year. I honestly don't think that you can, mate, in the eyes of the public. I don't think you can say, forget about the 22% that we got last year, we want another 29. I just think whether it defies the laws of logic or not, I just don't think you can ask the public to do that. And they will see this as a government that met the demands of the resident doctors. Not all of them, admittedly, but they came a hell of a lot further than any of the previous Tory administrations that you've alluded to.
Absolutely, but what was within that deal as well was a commitment to sorting out our exception reporting system, which is where you report any extra hours worked. And a deal for that was meant to be done by the end of last year, and it only came into play sort of spring this year. And it was yet another failure. Well,
it wasn't. It was a delay.
Okay, it was a delay. And when you're talking about getting paid for an extra 2 hours on top of a 12-hour shift already, those delays matter.
No, of course they do, but it's not. It doesn't justify the next round of industrial action, because it has actually been delivered, albeit belatedly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions, if I may, and thank you for opening yourself up to helping the rest of us understand this. When you were making your own decisions about what to do, when you were finishing your A-levels and looking at your options and going to medical school, how aware were you of the financial package available? And just so you know, because this is what I do for a living. It's not what you do for a living. I'm not trying to trip you up or do any gotchas here. I just want to know. I just want to work a few things out.
I'll be honest. Yeah. It didn't really play into my mind because I was passionate about. I'm the first doctor in the family. I'm the first person to go to university. I wanted a profession that was respected and was a guaranteed job for life, and I just want to focus on that second part at the moment.
Actually, don't. Just stay there. I'm going to go to the news. I'm going to come back to you because I think this is a really important perspective that you're sharing with us, and I don't want to squeeze you or hurry you. So let's go to Dominic Ellis for the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:32 is the time. It's extraordinary how people use personal perspectives to frame their answers to these questions. I'll get back to Callum imminently. This is from Phil. My son and daughter-in-law are consultants in Manchester. 105 grand a year full-time, which, as it happens, they are not, is enough, so I do not support the strike. But it's not them going on strike, Phil. I don't know if I've missed the point or if you're just suggesting that the crock of gold at the end of the rainbow is big enough to justify what another caller has picked up on, as Callum describes as a 36 grand a year he'll expect when he begins work later this year as a resident doctor, or formerly known as a junior doctor. Gregor points out that that's roughly what he'd expect as a forklift operator, 36 grand a year, and that doctors should be getting much more. All so-called junior doctors should leave the country immediately. That may result in a government U-turn with doctors' wages. I mean, doctors are leaving the country. What they should really do is manufacture some completely bogus research claiming that millions of them have already left the country, and then get all the useful idiots on radio and newspapers in this country to read it out unchallenged without checking where the sources have come from, where the numbers have come from, and claim that there's some sort of exodus which justifies the pay rise, which is exactly, by the way, what's happened with the wealth tax. Anyway, back to Callum in Hull. The phone lines are open, 0345 606 0973, if you've heard something you want to respond to. And we were talking about, I mean, I can't be proud of you, Callum, because we've only just met, but when you described to me the fact that you're the first person in your family to go to university, let alone become a doctor, and you did so through a profound sense of vocation, and you didn't spend much time looking at the financial implications. You were too excited to be getting into medical school and getting stuck into your studies. When did the financial penny drop?
It was about in my third year of medical school when the competition ratios for choosing when you become the doctor you want to be in terms of specialties were going up and up. And now, I don't think they've released the latest ones, but last time I checked, the specialty I wanted to go to is 6-1 in terms of successful to unsuccessful applicants.
Right.
And that is a sort of state school first university graduate is really intimidating for me, because the thought of needing to be better than 5 other doctors is very difficult, and it's no longer that guaranteed progression of employment. And a lot of doctors are having to revert to sort of self-employed locum roles when they don't get into into specialty placement. And that has knock-on effects more widely in terms of life, in terms of mortgage applications and things like that. And it's just not got that security anymore. And I think part of the striking for pay is also getting back that professional security as well, if that makes sense.
It makes absolutely perfect sense. And I mean, there are hairs to split over the variables chosen by the BMA to make these comparisons between income now and income then. There are even hairs to split over why they've chosen 2008 as the comparison date. But nobody would argue that, like for like, a resident doctor is going to be as well off or as or better off, as secure. It's funny how language works, isn't it? You say they use secure. No one's going to be as secure today as they were 20 years ago. If you say richer, it feels immediately different. So that focused your mind. It didn't do anything to dissuade you from continuing your studies. And if I've understood you correctly, as you contemplate possibly not your dream career, if you contemplate the possibility of not getting into the role that you most want to get into, you worry that the deal you would be left with, or the life you would be left with, would be an insecure one.
Yeah, that's why you've got doctors working Uber and Deliveroo and things like that. It's not secure anymore, and that needs to be sorted out just as much as the pay dispute. And I think the reason why a lot of doctors have voted to strike is to show the government that they won't be pushed over on these issues. And there's many issues in medicine at the moment. There's the Leng Review imminently coming out as well. And all of these things add together to make a profession very unhappy and very insecure.
What is morale like among your cohort?
Awful.
Why? Why?
One of my closest friends from medical school, she isn't becoming a doctor now, and that's because of the random allocation system as well. She's deferring a year, but if she doesn't get where she wants to work the next year, she can't go in again. That's it. That's the only other option, is to leave. Or work in an area that's very far from a family and support network.
Which people don't want to do. And you've put me in precisely the position I was expecting to be put in, although not quite so completely, which is I can sympathise with every single thing you said, and yet there's something I can't get past when I come to what happened last year. It's why the first callers demand that we don't bring that into our contemplations. Also stuck in my craw is that people listening to this might have developed enormous sympathy for you, but they know that people in your position got a 22% pay rise last year, and that is something that they can only dream of. So how dare you, they would say, come back now and ask for 29% more?
Yeah, I think the other thing to look at is to move away from percentages. And I know you hate the word optics, but £17 an hour to £21 an hour for a doctor who looks after patients at the very sickest, straight out of medical school, when you're the only doctor on a night with only senior support there, you're looking after very sick patients with a lot of responsibility. And I don't think £21 an hour is asking for a lot for that.
That is probably the line that the union leaders should take, isn't it? Because again, you know, if the difference between the word secure and the word rich is interesting, the difference between 29% after 22% and, well, that got us 17 an hour and we're asking for 21 feels like a very, very different proposal to me.
Definitely.
Well, we shall see. And good luck, and thank you. It is 10:39. Okay. I told you it was a pendulum morning. Juna got in touch to say that the first two resident doctors to come on the programme, one just about to finish, one just finishing that process and one just beginning it, had actually shifted his position from being in light support of the industrial action to actually being against it. I don't know if that would be the same at the end of Callum's contribution, but this from Ian is worth reading. I detect from your tone that your position on resident doctors is hardening with each exchange, and rightly so. I was a great supporter of the last industrial action and pleased that Wes Streeting stepped up and resolved a long-standing strike while giving the understanding that pay restoration would be an aim. It couldn't happen immediately. Many other professions have similarly suffered pay degradation under the Tories, and after a 22% rise followed by a current offer slightly above inflation, the current demands will undoubtedly alienate the public and therefore assist reform and the Tories, who I suspect will be significantly less helpful to their cause. Not necessarily. Nigel Farage will wait to see which direction the crowd is running in, mate, and then he'll run to the front of it and pretend he was leading all along. The Tories, I'm afraid even I haven't got any logical powers to work out what on earth motivates Kemi Badenoch, except a deep and abiding belief that Kemi Badenoch is a genius. It's 10:40. I wonder whether at the end of Callum's call, Ian, you feel the same, and whether or not that brilliant device of just saying we're on 17 an hour and we're asking for 21. I've just had a message off a window cleaner who's on roughly more than double what a resident doctor is on at the moment. But I don't want to get into debates about how much you earn as a window cleaner or indeed a forklift operator. Jeff's in Derby. Jeff, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good morning. Your last contributor is pretty much a little bit of stolen my thunder when I mean the text you read out. Because my real worry with this, as a massive supporter of the junior doctors and indeed the ambulance men, you know, yes, someone who's
the health service.
the health service in general, and I've been out on marches and been supportive, but this all seems a bit contrived to me, and I'm really disappointed about it, because for the first time in 14 years, I do think we've got a government who really supports the health service and are making some progress. And like all the conversations you've had recently, James, you can't put all the ills right in, a year. And I just think jumping on this really quickly now is going to do nothing for their cause long term, because taking the point that your contributors just made, it will just bring heap more misery on the current government. It will stop them in the tracks of one of the things that they can really shout about. We're getting to grips with waiting lists.
Reducing waiting lists. Yes.
Yeah. These are the positives that will bring the government back up into the polls, who support the NHS. And by doing this now, we'll literally just drive more people into the hands of right-wing parties in this country who have got no interest whatsoever in the NHS, maybe not even keeping the NHS. And I just think sometimes, and I've worked in unions, I just think sometimes you need to think about the bigger picture. If this was 3 years into the Labour government and Wes Streeting had proved that, he's not prepared to talk like the other one, don't even get into conversations, I'm more sympathetic to your last caller. I really am, because he was a brilliant caller.
Not now,
Nurse.
Not now, Nurse.
No, it's stupid in my opinion.
And you're not changed. Your position didn't change on the £17, £21 point. No,
it didn't, because I know this is why I supported him last time. I've got a friend whose sister is a junior doctor,
yes,
and we were both working on a call centre job at the time, and we were both getting more hourly rate than she was. So I actually, that's why I 110% support them. But I just think this is going to be like, I don't think they're going to get it. B, the government haven't got the money, and C, I don't think it's a long-term aim that will do them any good or the profession.
Oh, Lord, you're giving me a dose of cognitive dissonance, Jeff.
Sorry about that.
Well, actually, you're getting used to it now. I don't think I could argue the point, but I kind of agree with you and with Callum, and that I mean, the only way in which Callum and Liz prevail is if you do take last year's rise out of the equation entirely and judge it entirely on current deal compared to previous deal compared to the world we would like to live in. But I don't think I can do that, and I don't think you can either. Can I ask you a very cheeky question?
Of course.
Where did you stand on the winter fuel allowance?
I thought the policy of the winter fuel allowance was a good one. I just thought it wasn't thought through. It wasn't presented in the proper manner.
And the settlement, the £35,000 threshold that we ended up with?
I think it was too high.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. No, but then your position, I think, is consistent, because I do find myself noticing, as you pointed out, what pops up sometimes on previous phone-ins, themes that emerge repeatedly. If you are possessed of politics a bit like mine, and I suspect a bit like Jeff's, then you do run the risk sometimes of always thinking that money needs to be... we can't raise money from anyone. We can't raise money from anyone. If you're on the right, you can't raise money from the rich. If you're on the left, you can't save money from the non-rich. So you've got to protect the pensioners. You've got to protect the doctors. The problem is there are lots of rich pensioners. And there are also lots of rich doctors, but none of them are resident doctors. So, I mean, my pendulum, you're tired of hearing about my pendulum, frankly, I imagine, but I think it just swung again. I can't separate. Tell me why I should. Why should I take last year's 29% pay rise out of my pontifications when I'm deciding on an almost moral level? And no one could sound more supportive of doctors in general than Jeff. That's the point, isn't it? That's what we're driving at today. The sense of public support being crucial to strike success, and the dangers of leadership's hemorrhaging it through the timing of this move. 10:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:49 is the time. So mentioned cognitive dissonance a moment ago. Let me tell you what I mean by that. I know you know what the phrase means, but I simultaneously, at the moment, hold in my head two contradictory thoughts. The first is that £36,000 a year for resident doctors. That's why they've changed the description from junior, because we had a perception in our minds that they were all like Doogie Howser. They were all, still wet behind the ear. Actually, he was highly qualified, but, don't split hairs. That they were trainees, that they weren't fully fledged, that they were apprenticeships, that they hadn't finished their education. They're resident doctors. They're just not consultants. So 36 grand a year is ridiculously low, in my opinion, and my inbox is full of people telling me that they earn more than that and are nowhere near as important as doctors. Let me find you a good one. Moz in Regent's Park puts it well. I love you. You don't need to say that, Moz. But anyway, doctors should start on 70 grand. They start saving lives the moment they qualify. I earn that much and I don't. I earn more than that, and I don't either. So, that argument works. Alyssa, right, £17 an hour, is that really all they get? That's only slightly more than a retail manager. That's horrendous. Nothing wrong with being a retail manager. My mum was one, but I know what you mean, Alyssa. I was slightly aghast that they were asking for another pay rise, but I'm now fully behind them again. So here's the cognitive dissonance. £36,000 a year it's a national shame. It's pathetic for people who are going to spend several years completing the second stage of their medical journey. But I don't think they should get a 22% pay rise now. How can I hold those two positions at the same time? Tell me why I shouldn't. 0345 6060 973. Or tell me how you square that cognitive dissonance. You're the same as me. Yeah, it's a pittance, but they shouldn't get it now. How do you do it? Because I'm not sure I can. I'm seeing them as contradictory and irreconcilable, which is weird because it's not a position I like to be in. 10:51 is the time. No Hostages points out that journalists always interrogate why workers strike, but not why bosses thought they could cut pay year after year and not provoke a strike. Who wouldn't strike if their wages kept falling just so the rich could dodge tax, which again I find myself in broad agreement with until I bring in last year's 29% pay rise, which puts them in a different category entirely from the people you described. Their wages have not kept falling. They went up by 29% last year, so it doesn't work. How do you do it? How do you square it? Getting lots of these in. Paul, I'm a lorry driver. I deliver pillows and garden furniture. I'm on just shy of 43 grand a year. Doctors will end up on a lot more. But it does seem incredible that we've ended up paying them 36 grand a year when almost everybody listening to this would agree they should be on more. But I also sense that a significant proportion, if not an actual majority of people listening to this, don't think they should get 22% now. How do we make sense of this together? 0345 6060 973. James is in Southampton. James, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Morning, James.
I'd like to say that the narrative being pushed by the VMA is quite clever.
Go on.
And ultimately, no one's talking about the whole package. And for context, I'm a pilot in the Air Force, so I do understand some of it.
Yes.
The package doesn't talk about the fact they get over 23% pension contributions, which isn't the same in the private sector, which needs to be factored in. Mm-hmm. You can talk about the fact recently Labour... Sorry, go ahead.
I will. Just to clarify, not to quibble, I mean, you're going to be paid a lot more in the private sector as a doctor, so you'll be able to make pension arrangements independently of what your employer is offering you with the extra wages that you get. So if you're going to compare, or if you're going to complain about lack of full package explanation, then I have to point out that there's a lack of full package explanation in what you just said.
No, apologies. I basically
That's all right, you don't have to apologise.
Compare it with a lorry driver, because the lorry driver won't have the same pension contribution.
Not anymore.
Additionally, they can't talk about comparison between the US and Australia because cost of living's way more over there.
Yeah.
And the whole of the country has stagnated on salary over the last 30 years in comparison with those two countries.
Yes.
And they have the job security. So it is completely different. And they also knew what they were getting into when they signed up. I could earn £50,000 more in the private sector. I don't have the job security. I don't have the pension contributions. So it is a cat. Well, that's why I was interested in what Callum had to say and the point in his training
at which he sort of felt the financial penny drop, because to pick up precisely on your points, he's drawn into it by a sense of national duty, national service, altruism, and also security. And it's not as secure as he thought it was going to be, partly because of the financial rewards in place if you don't get the the spot you want when you move up to the next level, and if you've got 86 grand's worth of debt, I don't think you spend that much time counting what you'll be in receipt of when you retire either. So there's a lot of swings and roundabouts here. Are you, I sense, unsupportive of the latest action?
I am, and I kind of think the system's flawed, because if you're going to accept the payoff, there has to be a period where you're not going to continuously hold the country to ransom, especially in the situation the country finds itself in. And I feel like they are losing the support of the public, as your programme is starting to portray.
Yes, I think you're right. Although one texter points out that his pendulum is swinging all over the place. Somebody better call a doctor. I struggle to find. He's not the only one, but that there's cognitive dissonance there. For both of us, I think, probably less so for you, because I think that £17 an hour, regardless of pension contributions and the rest of it, is ridiculously low.
Yeah, I guess the problem is you're balancing the light at the end of the tunnel with the fact you've got to start somewhere, and you'll be on well over £100,000 a year. The problem is
just over. Again, I'm being a pedant. It's just over £100,000.
They could end up overtaking the consultant salaries
on average.
So,
yeah, and the timing is all, and it just does feel that the country is not in a place to. And that's certainly Wes Streeting's position, is that we went as far as we could go last year. If anything, we're even clearer on the mess that we're in fiscally and the stresses that the country is under economically. The idea that we're going to find another 29% for you is, frankly, pie in the sky.
Indeed.
Okay, pie in the sky. There you go. You see, we ended with an aviation. Thank you, James. I think that might be the point, isn't it? It's the turnout is relatively low. It's only, I don't really like the threshold for going on strike, but it makes more sense to me the more it settles in to our society. Imagine if turnout was 10% and every doctor in the country was coming out on strike as a consequence of 51% of 10% of doctors voting for it. So you have to be over 50%. And they only got to 55. Of the doctors that voted, a huge majority was in favour of industrial action, but 2/3 of doctors didn't vote. You got a 29% pay rise last year, which absolutely needs to be seen in the context of degradation and diminishment over decades. Going back, the BMA would say to 2008, of course, the point of the global financial crisis, so it may not be a completely arbitrary moment, but almost everybody listening to this will also have seen their wages in real terms come down over the course of that period. And of course, they've seen other things rise exponentially as their wages haven't caught up, most obviously property. So there's nothing unique about that from a resident doctor's point of view. And I don't know, and I don't think I've succeeded in properly unpicking this. I don't know whether you can get past the 29%. I just don't know. I mean, some of you think that I should. JD writes, James, stop banging on about the 29% last year. If it was 29% of 100,000 and they'd had a 29,000 annum pay rise, then of course nobody would have sympathy. But 29% of 30,000 is a relative pittance. Common sense needs to prevail here. We have long waiting lists and a salary that is not attractive to people wanting to be doctors. For goodness sake, he almost wrote. They are doctors, highly skilled, highly educated, brackets at their own expense, close brackets, and we need them. It's a no-brainer. If the Treasury doesn't have the budget, then find it. Tax the billionaires who also need the doctors. I mean, of course, they don't necessarily need the NHS doctors, unless things are desperately serious. And Sue writes, James, my daughter is a consultant doctor in the NHS and would no more work privately than fly to the moon. Just because doctors could earn more privately doesn't mean that they will, or indeed that they want to. And there goes the pendulum again. I think I owe you an apology. I said that by 11 o'clock today I'd have a clearer position on where I personally stood on this, and therefore hopefully you would too. And yet the quality of callers was such that with almost every contribution I felt the pendulum swinging. It swung pretty hard with Callum, and then it swung back again with Jeff and James. So I don't know. I don't think I can I don't think I can look you in the face and say doctors deserve 29%. The minute you come back and say, sorry, doctors deserve 22%, the minute you come back and say, well, they got 29% last year, I struggle. Then a doctor pops up on the other side of the room and says, we're asking for a rise from £17 an hour to 21. You do.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we pick up on that story. Nicholas Mostyn, former High Court judge. It's all good, isn't it? I had not even thought of that. One of the things you may find slightly surprising about this is, can you remember what we did on yesterday's show? I appreciate you're probably not supposed to be paying quite as much attention as I'm supposed to be. But can you remember? Sometimes I get home and one of the girls will ask me what we did on the show today. I have no idea. Absolutely no clue whatsoever. And I'll sit there and I'll just think about it for a minute. And every single Thursday, if they're in, one of them will say, what came up on Mystery Hour? I didn't listen to Mystery Hour today. What happened on Mystery Hour? No idea. Can't remember at all. Never could. It's not even an age thing. Did you hear what that High Court judge just said in the news? So how on earth is a witness in a criminal case going to remember 3 years later what happened? I hate it when this happens, but I also kind of love it, because it means that territory we thought we'd explored still has much to give up. But imagine that. Some of these delays are extraordinary in cases coming to court. I quite like you to tell me about your experiences in that field, what it's like to be either the victim of a crime or a witness to a crime, or even the accused. And no doubt 90% of the people who call me to tell me that they were accused of a crime are on the line to tell me they were absolutely innocent. The problem with that is, of course, that an even higher percentage of people in prison will tell you that they were absolutely innocent of the crimes they committed as well. But it's not the biggest violin. But if you have been accused of a crime, your whole life is on hold until you get your moment in court. Your 12 good men brackets and women close brackets and true. You get your taste of British justice. 3 years. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think we'd have enough to do a phone-in on that element of the story. But that's the element of the story that just made my ears prick up. What the hell happens when you wait 3 years to come to court? What does it do to the likelihood of achieving resolution? I don't mean getting a guilty verdict, I mean getting a correct verdict. Does the likelihood of getting a correct verdict diminish according to delay? It must do, mustn't it? I mean, the likelihood of me being able to remember what I did on the show yesterday is much, much higher, even though I can't, than the likelihood of me being able to remember what I did on the show a week last Tuesday. Isn't it? That's just logical. And that's pretty much what the criminal justice system has become. The delays are so huge as a direct yes, as a direct consequence of austerity. And then along came COVID to absolutely highlight the awfulness of what had been done by austerity to the criminal justice system. So, jury trial, synonymous in this country, particularly in England and Wales, absolutely synonymous with the right to a fair trial, is... Well, it's in the balance this morning. Thousands of defendants could lose the right to a jury trial under plans published today. Sir Brian Levison, former judge, as you probably remember from his attempts to reform print media in this country, attempts that were, of course, completely scuppered by Theresa May and her mates, one of whom is now on the board of the BBC. But Sir Brian Levison, a former judge with 55 years of criminal law, who was asked by the government to come up with proposals to tackle the record courts backlog. I've got to start making a list of phone-ins I don't think we can have. It's a little bit meta, but I don't think we can have a phone-in about what long delays did to... Yes, we probably can, actually. Let's put that on the board. Stop being such a doom-monger, O'Brien, and recognise the brilliance of your audience. There will almost certainly be people listening to this programme who can tell us what a very, very long delay did to their chances of justice, or the chances of justice, whether you're the victim, whether you're the accused, or whether you're a witness. 0345 6060 973. Describe to me the problem, okay, of the really long delays. Things that will make the rest of us go, what? That's ridiculous. How on earth are you ever going to get a proper trial if no one can remember what happened that night? I want to know about that. I want to know how bad it is, how widespread it is, and what has happened to you. So hit those numbers now. You will get through. I don't think it would be helpful to have a phone-in about what we could do to reduce the backlog, apart from what Brian Levison has suggested. I don't know if you've ever heard phone-ins where people are invited to ring in and come up with their own solutions to the small boats crossing the English Channel stories. I mean, rarely do you hear people passing an IQ point around the room so carefully. It's quite extraordinary. There's a double thing that goes on. The first thing is, I might not know much, but I think I've got a better grasp of the facts than every single person who understands international law and all the rest of it. I do this, Joe. I mean, you might get a job in one of Nigel Farage's parties with that kind of worldview. But, got some news on that front for you shortly. But you're very, very likely to come up with it. But anyway, it doesn't stop phone-in hosts from asking. Give me a ring if you're old and feeling a bit poorly. Give me a ring if you're racist and have got a brilliant idea how to deal with small boats crossing the English Channel. Give me a ring if you've never given it any thought before, but you think you might have the answer to the backlogs in the UK courts. Do you see? I'm not overly optimistic that that's going to be a particularly great phone-in. But I do think there will be enough people listening who can tell us what impact the delay has upon the justice system. The long delay, the longer the delay, the bigger the impact. So I want your calls now. But then you've got this weird moral conundrum, haven't you? What if it is absolutely necessary that we do it? What if needs must? It's not unlike the last hour where you can say doctors should get paid more, but not now. You should absolutely always have the right to trial by jury, but you can't now because it is simply untenable. We are never, Brian Levison has concluded, going to be able to take meaningful bites out of this backlog, out of these extraordinary delays before things come to court without doing away with one of the largest reasons why everything moves so slowly, and that is juries. That is jury service. I absolutely bow to the brilliance of the women who were running the jury room at the court where I was called for jury service as recently as last February. But my goodness me, we talk on the programme about turning oil tankers around. They've got to turn around about 10 an hour. The sheer volume of people coming into the room, all with their own personal complaints and pettifogging queries, and then the fact that you've got to get them on juries, and then the fact that you've got to collate them and you've got to whip them in, and the lawyers exchange arguments and they get whipped out again, and then they get whipped back in again, and then they get sent home, and then they come tomorrow, and then they've got to be there for 2 weeks, and some of them are there for 10 weeks, and and they've always got to be there, and one of them gets sick, and 4 of them get sick, and the whole trial. I mean, that's the logistical. So I'm going to write that word down. There is the logistical. And it is today being pitched against the, what word do we use? The historical and the ethical. So it has been historically decided that the most ethical system of justice involves jury service. It involves juries. And yet, logistically, the argument seems to be that it's currently impossible. So what do? I'll tell you. We create a new division of the Crown Court where a judge and 2 magistrates, who, remember, are volunteers. They're not. You don't become a magistrate after a long, glittering career as a lawyer. They're kind of like glorified jurors. They will hear either way offences, those in which the defendant can currently choose to be heard by either a magistrate or a jury in the Crown Court. You will take away the right to be heard in the Crown Court for offences that carry a maximum sentence of 2 years or less. This means that some cases, including sexual assault, racially or religiously aggravated strangulation, I wonder if there's a comma missing there, harassment and child abduction, could be the right to jury could be removed for people accused of offences like that. And because you'd reclassify some that could be tried only in the magistrate's court. Trial by judge alone for serious and complex fraud cases. I'm here for that. First off, that makes sense to me. One of my anxiety dreams has been called for a fraud case. Sometimes people spend 6 or 7 months. Should we try and find who listening to this has been on a jury for the longest? Yeah, let's do that. You don't have to ring in. You can text me if you want. I'd rather you ring. The longest serving juror currently listening to this programme on 0345 6060973. I'll tell you now, it will almost certainly be a fraud or a complex fraud case. What the heck does that do to your life? 9 months? I think some have been even longer. I don't know what the record is, but we'll have our own little record today. The JOB Longest Serving Juror Award is up for grabs. 0345 6060973. I want your tales of delay. I want you to tell me what the delay in your own case has done to your life and indeed your hopes of seeing justice. I can't quite believe Steve when he says I've been waiting 7 years to go to court and I've got another 9 months to wait. But looking at some of the stories attendant upon Leveson's report today, it's possible. If they brought in the top 3 recommendations, we'd save 9,000 sitting days in Crown Courts out of a current total of 110,000. So it's a fair old chunk, but possibly not enough. And most of us would struggle to articulate what we would lose. And that's my main question this hour. Okay, so it's logistical on one side and it's historical and ethical on the other. Sounds a bit like a tongue twister. So logistically, I don't think you can argue with any of this. Historically and ethically, what would we be losing were we to surrender our right to trial by jury? Were we to have it taken away? I don't think we'd get a say in the process. Actually, it's going to be legislative. The executive will decide what happens to the judiciary, which is always a little bit dangerous. I give it another couple of years, as Peter points out, we could probably get AI to do it all. 0345 6060973 is the number you need. So I don't think that I just want your tales of... Yeah, no, I do, actually, because if I say to you, what would we lose, you can ring me up with examples of things we'd be happy to lose. I told you probably too often about the woman I encountered when I wasn't doing jury service, for the record. I was there for 2 weeks and I didn't get on a jury that actually heard a case. I got on a couple of juries that got discharged immediately. I began to take it a little bit personally. But I told you about the woman I overheard at the next table telling everybody with a completely straight face that Michelle Obama was a man and that Volodymyr Zelensky had spent all the money sent to Ukraine for weapons on yachts. And I mean, she was so absolutely certain of her position, she even passed her phone around. Would you want her to hear your case? You're not really allowed to tell anybody what has gone on in the actual jury room, but the notion that there's something precious to a trial by your peers is challenged somewhat by knowledge of your peers, isn't it? Think of the kind of people that ring radio stations to tell you how they would solve the problem of small boats, and then ask yourself if you'd want them to be sitting in judgment if you were to be wrongly accused of a crime, or indeed if the person rightly accused of a crime against you was sitting in the dock. So what would we lose? Think about this. Lawyers more than welcome to ring in. We had quite a lot of doctors in the last hour, so let's keep the middle class elitism alive and kicking. But what do you reckon? 0345 6060973. What would we lose if our right to a trial by jury was in some cases taken away? 0345 6060973. And then on a slightly less serious note, who here spent the longest time on a jury? The number remains the same. And the thing I am really interested in, but as I said, there aren't actually that many crimes in this country, whatever you may have read on Twitter, Nazi Twitter, as I think it should henceforth be known. How do really long delays affect you as the accused, as the victim, as a witness? The really long delays, how do they affect you? So 2 little questions and 1 big one. Little question, what was it like? What's it like to be affected by these delays? Little question, who spent the longest time on a jury? Big question, what do we lose? What do we lose when we lose the right to trial by jury? Hit those numbers now. You will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
is 19 minutes after 11, and if any of my colleagues on LBC were toying with the idea of not covering the BMA vote for more industrial action, I suspect that the breaking news I have for you will have hardened their resolve somewhat. There will be a full walkout from 7 a.m. on Friday the 25th of July until 7 a.m. on Wednesday the 30th of July as things stand. Say what you like, and trade unions traditionally move in lockstep with the Labour movement. The BMA may be slightly different, but say what you like about the Labour movement. You don't really need an enemy when you're so dedicated to defeating yourself from within, and perhaps this is yet more evidence of that process. I'll be surprised personally if it goes ahead, but going ahead it currently is. The leaders of the BMA Resident Doctors Committee have advised that doctors have spoken clearly. That's a turnout of 55%. After the results of a vote published today revealed that 90% of resident doctors voting in favour of a potential return to industrial action. So that's a full workout. I'm going to make two predictions, which will cancel each other out. One, I don't think there'll be a full walkout from 7 a.m. on Friday the 25th of July until 7 a.m. on Wednesday the 30th of July. And two, if there is, or if there's something close to that, I think you'll see a lot more strike breakers than you did last time. But hey, what do I know? 20 minutes after 11, jury service, various questions. You've heard them often enough. I'm not going to repeat them, but you're going to start answering them. John's in Wandsworth. John, what would you like to say?
So I was attacked 2023 time, and initially after the attack I had to wait a week for the police to actually even attend, and I've just been given a court date of January 2026.
When did you get that?
Probably about a month ago.
So, and you can't, this is going to sound as if I'm badgering the witness, but you can't remember what year it happened in?
No. Since the attack, it's affected my memory.
Right, that's what I was trying to delicately nudge you towards, actually.
Yeah, so it's affected my memory. I have a lifelong condition where I'm left deaf.
In one ear?
In one ear, yeah. This has completely affected the way my life works and my life runs, because there's, I know many people say, when people are talking to them, you can kind of ignore them and blame it on the deafness, but when you're trying to actually listen to someone, you feel awful having to ask them to repeat again. And it's just that long. I don't understand why it's such a long, drawn-out process.
Because there's so many people in front of you. It's just a queue, isn't it? Think of it as a queue, and you are extraordinarily, well, at least in terms of people who've been given court dates, you're right at the back of it.
But then you've got people going to court for what I see as not really big things, like people posting their beliefs on Twitter.
No, you don't go to court for that. You go to court for encouraging people to set fire to hotels containing human beings. And if you think the clatter around the head you got was traumatic, imagine what it's like if someone's trying to burn you in your bed.
Yeah, very good point.
That's what I'm here for.
The whole process, the whole system just seems to be so, with there's so many people waiting to go into court.
What's the likelihood? I mean, I don't know what the rules are regarding what detail you can and can't share with me. Because we don't know who. But I mean, just as an amateur, John, what's the likelihood of getting the same level of justice, the same clarity and memory? I mean, your memory aside, but everybody else's memories, 4 years after the event than it would have been 3-4 months after the event.
It's going to be completely, to some people, like the only witness that I had to it may have forgotten a lot of the details about it.
You'd expect so. That's the bit I can't really get my head around. Tell me a little bit more about the impact, about not the impact of the injury or the impact of the attack, but the impact of the delay and what it does to you, knowing that the light at the end of the tunnel is so far away you can barely see it.
So it feels like that sort of story in my life, I can't close the door on that because I don't know what's moving forward. My anxiety around what's going to happen, future-wise, what this is how it's going to affect me as a person, my mental state. I know there's a lot of people that go on about mental state, but it has affected that.
You're breaking my heart in two ways. Number one, in the way of what's happened to you, but also number two, in the way that you're qualifying so much of what you say with tabloid nonsense. If your mental state has been affected, mate, then you deserve sympathy and support. You don't need to qualify it with some idiot in the Sun or the Daily Mail or on the radio saying, oh, everyone's got a mental health condition. The reason why we talk about it is because of people with real issues and real problems. It breaks my heart that you've been reduced to sort of qualifying your own suffering by saying, oh, I know a lot of people think this and I know a lot of people think that. You don't need to do that. You deserve sympathy and support, and at the moment you're not getting it. And you certainly don't need to compare your experiences of the criminal justice system to people who are up for inciting murderous violence against even more vulnerable people than you. But it's the same process of tabloidification that you've suffered from. Go on, I hope you get it. But I don't know what I'd feel in your position. I'd feel that the likelihood of getting the verdict I deserve was shrinking every week, every passing month.
Yeah. I've had no support from the police service. I've asked questions like, do I need to, I've never been in this position. Do I need to sort out my own solicitor, or do I need to do this? And all they've said to me is, no, we'll be in touch. And I've not heard anything.
I mean, you don't, for the record. The prosecution and the defence is focused upon the accused. You don't need a lawyer in court. And if I'm wrong, then stay tuned for 10 minutes, and I'll clarify exactly what is going on. But the confusion is just going to get bigger with that's an awful picture that you paint. It really is, John. And regardless of how much or how little sympathy you may have for other people, I have nothing but sympathy for you. That's terrible. But what do we lose if that went in front of a judge and two magistrates 2 years ago? How could anyone really argue that is a less desirable outcome than the only other option John has? Which is, all right, you'll get a trial by jury, but not until 2026, 3 or 4 years after the actual event. Claire's in Stanmore. Claire, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. Hope you're well.
Very.
I would just like to look at this process against the process that they have in the United States. This is not a political discussion. This is just what happens over there. So currently, over 97% of cases in America do not go through a court system. They do not see the judge. They do not see a jury. They do not see any of that adversarial process which we're talking about, where everything is heard openly in public and decided by a jury. It's done through what they call plea management. And this is started in the 60s and got built up and built up and built up until it got to the current figures that are being dealt with today. And what it's become is a plea management system. You may have heard about plea bargaining and that kind of thing.
Yes, of course.
And it's transactional. So it becomes a process whereby they'll say, okay, look, I know you want to go to court and say you're innocent, but if you say you're guilty, you'll only get 6 months and this, that and the other. And because you're in that transactional environment, not an environment where you're going to be heard by your peers, you're thinking only in transactional terms. What do I get out of this? So you have a process where that is what justice is becoming, and that is my fear with this conversation, that it doesn't take us completely there yet, but we're definitely.
Why does it take us? Why does it even take us closer? Because because the notion of a reduced sentence in return for a guilty plea already exists in our judicial system.
The concept exists, although it's not actually enshrined. Plea bargaining is not actually.
Oh, sure, but the practice exists.
No. It does exist, although judges can completely.
So why do you worry that this nudges us closer to it?
Because it becomes more of an alternative. It becomes more of an alternative to say, well, actually, let's push this away from the public
Okay, well, I'm just giving you an alternative point of view.
And I'm grateful for it, but I want to understand it better. I don't. So there's a judge and 2 magistrates hearing a case that is currently heard by a judge and 12 jurors. Okay. And that there's a judge and 2 magistrates hearing a case, settling a case that would previously be settled by 12 jurors. How does that edge us closer
what I'm saying is it's one step away from what the traditional tenets
yes,
of
it is,
justice
but I don't think personally.
So
I don't see how it's a step towards what you describe. I agree that it's a step away from where we are now, but I don't see why the destination you describe is the inevitable one, or even the plausible one.
Pretty much, because they'll just look around and they'll see how it's done in other jurisdictions, and they'll say that, you know, this is...
I mean, neither of us can prove the other one wrong, but I don't quite see... If this was one of those children's toys where an electrical spark hops from one orb to another, then, for me at least, your orbs are operating more effectively than mine, Claire, because the spark isn't reaching the other. I don't see why. So it's stepping away, certainly, from what has gone before. That's a given. That's obvious. That's absolutely baked into the story, but... Why would it end up being a form of plea bargaining? Where, I think the danger is, that Claire articulates perfectly, that people who aren't guilty feel compelled to say that they are guilty, because if it goes to trial and they're found guilty, they're going to get hit a heck of a lot harder than they would be if they pleaded guilty, didn't go to trial, and got the reduced sentence as a consequence. And I mean, I think, and I'm always wary of mentioning Magna Carta, not least because, of course, she died in vain. I think that is a central part of trial by jury, is it protects you from some of the things that this prevalence of plea bargaining exposes you to. But I don't know, maybe I'm being naive. Or a bit thick. Wouldn't be the first time. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 11, and I said this to you last time we turned our attention to suggestions that we could live without trial by jury, or as Lord Leveson has suggested this morning, that perhaps the only way to address the enormous backlog in our criminal justice system would be to do away with trial by jury in some cases. It's not even that many cases out of the overall load, but it would be progress. It would help. And we don't know. You'll forgive me once again for not being fully clear on what every nation in the Union does, but this is England and Wales that we're talking about. One of the, for my money, one of the ugliest chapters in UK history involved the abolition of trial by jury in Northern Ireland. I don't know what the score is in Scotland, but I do know that we have not all of us, but many of us have a sort of innate sense that trial by jury is valuable to us. And I do think it goes back to Magna Carta. I know that was really only for the benefit of barons and all the rest of it. And anyone who mentions it on social media is almost by definition a conspiracy theorist. But it is a fairly important chapter in UK history when it comes to the distribution of power in these islands. And we all come away from that period with a belief, a conviction that trial by jury is really important. Why? First answer is it dilutes prejudice. If you've got 12 people there, then one person's prejudice is not going to determine the verdict, unless they're brilliant advocates and they make like Henry Fonda in 12 Angry Men. But if you've only got a judge and the judge doesn't like blue and you're wearing blue in the dock, that is a huge flaw in your criminal justice system. If you've got a jury and one or two of them don't like blue, they can be overruled or argued round by people who don't have a problem with blue. So that's my first thing. I don't know what the other stuff is, really. I don't know why trial by jury is historically adjudged to be the least bad option. And that means I can't answer myself the question of what we would lose if it was done away with. If you can remind us, especially if you're a lawyer, ideally a High Court judge, you're more than welcome. 0345, so just give me a ring before you head down to the Garrick for lunch. 0345 6060 973. What do we lose if we lose trial by jury? And why is it precious? Because in the words of Joni Mitchell, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. And on this occasion, I'd quite like to know what I've got before it's gone. And the second bit of this phone-in is the impact that these enormous delays have. We probably should have talked about this more than we have done, but it is historically not one of those issues that you queue up to tell me about. John in Wandsworth doing a cracking job of explaining what the impact can be, but, I mean, there will be countless other people enduring similar experiences. What does that huge delay do? And as Nicholas Mostyn said in our news bulletin at 11 o'clock, can you imagine what a witness... what is it like if you're a witness? I mean, hand on heart, what are the odds on you remembering as clear as day something that happened 3.5 years ago? I can't quite get my head around that, but if you can, call me. Deborah is in Aberystwyth. Deborah, what would you like to say?
I work in mental health, and we deal with people who are raped.
Oh, Lord.
And I don't deal with the details of the rape. We deal with people and how they feel after they've been raped.
Yes.
And in order to get that treatment, they need to come to us and we make records of what's happened to them.
Yes.
In court, that can be called as evidence, even though it's after the fact.
Yes.
And people aren't seeking help because they don't want the details of how they felt about it to be revealed in court.
That is it. Forgive me, I'm being a bit slow on the uptake today. How is that relevant to the delays that are currently in place?
If it's delayed, people delay getting any help at all and potentially become more and more ill.
Right.
If the subject isn't dealt with and it sits there and it festers and people become unwell, and then they deny themselves treatment.
So they only... Frightened. Sorry, I told you I was being slow on the uptake. Thank you for being so patient with me. Your professional role only kicks in at a certain point in the judicial process.
We're not part of the judicial process. It's a choice for whether the person comes to get help in the mental health system.
And if they know that they're going to have to wait years to go to court, they become less likely to come to you sooner.
They don't come to us at all because they're frightened that their records are going to be called for and they don't want them revealed, because essentially what they feel afterwards and how they deal with it shouldn't be part of the court process, I don't believe. It's part of their therapy, treatment and recovery.
There are two separate issues here, aren't there? I mean, there's that point you've just made, and then there is the impact that delays have.
Yes.
Yes, OK. I just wanted to clarify that I wasn't being completely dopey.
Not at all.
And, I mean, how bad has it got in recent years? How bad have
people killed themselves.
Oh, no. So I suspect the question of whether, if I said to you, here's something we could do to speed things up, you wouldn't really ask for the details. You'd say, yes, please.
Yeah.
So stick these scumbags in front of a judge and a couple of magistrates. I don't think rape would actually qualify for that yet, but...
No, I think not. But
I could live with it.
It's the impact that something has on a person after the fact that they then can't deal with.
Yeah.
And it isn't being dealt with legally.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, but I presume, and you're the professional, but it adds to the sense of abandonment. It adds to the sense of either not being believed or not being respected when the system turns around and says, oh yeah, off you trot, we'll see you in 4 years' time.
And don't talk to anybody about it. Don't say anything about it. Oh, and don't say that you're not okay about it.
Oh, Lord. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Deborah. It is 20 to 12. There's yet another reason why I don't like something must be done as a slogan, or indeed as a rationale for policy. But the idea of leaving everything exactly as it is, with these enormous queues going round the block, people that Deborah works with suffering in the most unimaginable ways, people like John almost losing faith in the prospect of any justice, any light of justice ever appearing at the end of the tunnel. You need to tell me what we lose, because at the moment it's pretty hard to make a case, use legal language, make a case against Lord Levison's proposals. Caroline is in Ealing. Caroline, what made you pick up the phone?
Hello. I've never phoned your radio show, but I'm an avid listener. If I don't make any sense, I apologise.
Well, that will make two of us, Caroline. Caroline, so please don't worry about that.
I was in the gym listening to your show, and my situation is my husband was arrested at nearly 7 years ago, on an accusation of sexual assault. Then there was a 4-year gap before he was charged.
Good Lord.
And it will actually, well, I say the trial date is set for September. So we both, and what I actually call the unseen people, because people like myself, you don't think about. You don't think about the mothers, the wives of the prosecution and the defence.
Yeah. Your life is on hold as well.
My life for this amount of time, my mental health, I ended up in a mental health unit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I'm on antidepressants. I've tried everything. Like, I go to the gym regular. I tried to just survive. I survive every day. That's all we're doing. And I need closure. And the reason there's delays, I've experienced it. Like this year, we're supposed to have a pre-trial hearing.
Right.
Five court appearances, 5 hearings in a Crown Court, for the prosecution to say we haven't got our opening statement ready.
Good Lord.
And they had a year to prepare for that, and there has been 5 hearings, and it still has not been done. And we're supposed to be going to trial in September.
You're being tortured.
So, when they say about a prison sentence, I'm in prison, I'm in hell, and there are so many people out there, the prosecution and the defence, the mothers, the fathers, the sons.
Well, I suppose...
and I can't tell you how painful, I can't tell you how painful it is.
Oh, you are telling me. Even if you're not finding the words, your feelings are coming across loud and clear.
I've never phoned in to the radio station, and I know. I was listening to you, and I just started crying, and I thought...
I guess we described you, didn't we? We described exactly what was happening to you. As you know, and I'm sure you won't mind me saying this, until you called, most people wouldn't have really thought about the accused as being someone worthy of sympathy, and they may still not. But the wife, the mother, the children of an accused person whose entire life is put into this kind of turmoil. You've made a case for all of them, Caroline.
We're the unseen, shall we say, the people that. And it's people, and it's the accused. Their lives, it doesn't matter. They're not everyone's guilty.
You need to know.
I need to know. I need it to be over.
Can I pry a tiny bit? Can I? If this is inappropriate or undue, then just tell me to shut up. All right?
I will.
Promise.
Yeah.
Promise.
I promise.
So what you're telling me is that obviously you want to believe your husband, and a large part of you does, but you can't make that final move until the case has actually been heard.
This isn't about, for me, guilty or not. I need closure on this.
So that you know what the next chapter of your life is going to look like.
Yeah,
okay.
I do. And my life has changed in 7 years. I've changed as a person, and the person I am, I don't even really like. That is the honest truth.
What do you mean?
Where I used to trust people, where I was a happy-go-lucky person, I've got none of that.
What difference would it have made? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. What difference would it have made if it had come to court a year after he was charged? I mean, the 3 years before he was charged, after he was arrested. But if the wheels had moved much more quickly, what difference would it have made?
Well, I could have started... Well, I might actually have a life.
Yeah.
A future, something to look forward to actually start the healing process. But I don't think I'll ever be the same again.
I hear you. I really do.
I really don't. But
I hope you're wrong.
But anyway.
Do you have a view?
All right.
No, hang on. Do you have a view on trial by jury?
Personally, in this case, I personally would prefer it to be done by a judge. I do. I think, I've known people to have been on juries of cases they didn't even understand.
I hear you. No, you and me both. And
yeah.
And finally, is anyone looking after you?
Yeah, I have support.
Good. You deserve it. Because you deserve it.
I do.
You've done nothing.
I have so much guilt, and
Well, I'm not. I can't tell you that you shouldn't, because they're just words. But you've done nothing.
Yeah, I know.
You've done nothing.
But I'm still here. I'm still breathing. So
Well, you carry on. All right.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Well,
thank you.
No, thank you so much. And I'm so sorry you were in such an extraordinary position to tell us what it's like to be in the middle of stories like this. Oh, Caroline. It's 11:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51 is the time. What do you like with criticism? And what do you like when it's valid? Do you become more prickly or less prickly when the criticism is valid? So if someone says, James, you really shouldn't do that, and I think, yeah, I should, that's minor prickle. When you say, James, you really shouldn't do that, and I think, yeah, you're right, I shouldn't. Back in the day, I hesitate to say pre-therapy, but it may well be pre-therapy, I would have been really prickly about that. I don't know why. But you're absolutely right, Michael. I've been wrong throughout this hour. James, he writes, stop referring to him as Lord Leveson. He used to be Lord Justice Leveson when he was a sitting judge. Now he has retired as a judge. He should just be referred to as Sir Brian. You're absolutely right. My apologies. There's a little bit of me, I hope this isn't prickliness, there's a little bit of me that sort of goes, who cares? But the answer is, you care, Michael. And if you care, I care. And also, we should all care about accuracy and facts and evidence and detail and being right, correct. So, Sir Brian Leveson, not Lord Leveson, the artist formerly known as Lord Justice Leveson. Back to, what do we lose when we lose a right to trial by jury? Andrew's in Lanark. Andrew, what would you like to say? Well, I was going to ask you to give me a quick rundown on what the major differences are between the Scottish and the English legal systems, but we haven't got time. Talk to me about trial by jury.
Right. Hello, Mr. James O'Brien. I've spoken to you on a few occasions now, and I've got to say, it's usually about something to do with the police.
Right.
You really tapped into something here. Those last three callers were hard to listen to, really hard. And I just want to say right at the beginning, because what I'm going to say, I don't want to offend anybody. As far as the last lady that was on and the lady before, there needs to be a system in place for them where they can get some sort of early resolution, or at least get the ball rolling. Yeah. John is who really got me wanting to call you.
Right.
That guy, I've said to your researcher, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but if I'm quite happy for him to have my number and I'll speak to him. He needs somebody to put their arms under his oxters and lift him up off the floor. The guy, it's just coming out of him. He's so done with it. And there's a role, isn't there? An unofficial role. I forget what it's called. Is victim support.
Well, no, but also a friend in court type of thing as well.
That's right. That still exists.
I forget. Okay. Well, I don't think I can pass your details on to him, but hopefully he's still listening.
He's still listening. And
he can look into it and find someone.
Right. First of all, my opinion on the broader subject is, I've given evidence as an officer, as a witness, as an investigating officer, in one case as a defendant.
Right.
And no matter how long I had to wait, I would always, every day of the week and twice on a Sunday, choose a jury.
Why?
Choose a jury.
Why?
Because the chances of those 12 people together, you know, like you do the class average, you get a number off everybody and then divide it by whoever's in the class.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with a verdict. You may have some people who are not guilty, some people are guilty, some people are not sure. And 99.9% of the time, in my experience, the right verdict comes out. Now then.
Okay. But you haven't got anything to compare it to. I think it's called a Mackenzie friend. Thank you, Adam. So
Right.
it's just texting. But you haven't got anything to compare it to. What makes you think that if it was a judge and 2 magistrates, the hit rate would be lower than 99%?
Because I've experienced it. I can tell you now.
No, but you haven't, though.
I have in a magistrate's court.
Oh, I see. Of course you have. Sorry, yes.
In a magistrate's court, unless you get a district judge, and there's no guarantee that you will, and there's no guarantee that it'll be great. The lay magistrates, so the guy might be a butcher or on an electrical store chain or something, or a candlestick maker, and the person giving the legal guidance and steering is the clerk of the court. They're the qualifier. Now then, nothing wrong with that. Those people do a great job. We'd be lost without them. However, they are, in some cases, and quite a few I've seen, biased.
Yeah.
Some of them are biased for the prosecution. Some of them are biased for the defence.
Yeah.
Some, and this sounds really simplified, but I swear it's true, because we knew and we would talk about them. Some would like the police and some wouldn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I really...
And that's also true of the jury, but as you say, the more of them there are, the more diluting the number becomes.
Right. You get one biased guy in a room, and that's all you've got. You get 12 people with different biases. Somehow it works out, and so that's my view on the broad thing.
Yeah.
But I really, really wanted to say something to John if he's still listening.
Go on.
I absolutely promise him 1,000,000% that when he eventually gets to court, first of all, I know he's got some issues with memory. I'm sorry what happened to him. I'm even more sorry for the poor response he got. A week is horrendous. But I can promise him, I absolutely promise him, he's not going to be expected to rock up in court and remember something that happened all that time ago. He will have time to look at his statement and go over it. He should be on to victim support and the police now saying, I want to know what's going on. Don't say we'll be in touch. That's not good enough. He needs some support. He will look at it, and I also promise him, I can't speak as an expert because I don't know what his condition is, but generally speaking, when you read it, it comes back. And the most important message I want to give to him today is this. No matter what happens, no matter what's said, and more importantly, no matter what the verdict, no matter what the outcome of that trial is, I promise you, John, that standing up in that room and speaking, I don't know, it's a trendy phrase, I'm reluctant to use it, speaking your truth, telling what happened to you is massive. I can't tell you how big it is. And even if you don't get the result, the amount of victims that have come out from a not guilty verdict and said to me, do you know what? I would have rather a guilty verdict, but I feel so much better now. That's just sorted me right out. They call it closure and speaking my truth. And
don't use that voice. I like those phrases.
No, they're good. They're good. I'm trying to be.
I know you are. You're being anti-woke. I won't have it on this programme.
I apologise.
That's quite all right. But what about briefly, because Natasha's here now to talk about PMQs, which is on the horizon. What about the idea that the sooner that happens, the better, coming up against your conviction that a jury system is vastly preferable, because the gap gets bigger and bigger. The more jury, the heavier you lean towards your first point, the longer the wait for the second point.
Well, there's a really easy answer. Well, I think it's an easy answer.
I'll be the judge of that. Go on.
What they're saying is let's put more magistrates' courts on and stuff like that. Because the CPS...
With a judge and 2 magistrates.
Yeah, but the CPS don't just process Crown Court cases. They process everything from murderers to shoplifters and everything in between. So if they could speed up the magistrate system and come up with an answer for that and get that moving, that would have a knock-on effect and speed up the CPS's ability to process the more serious stuff.
Okay. I think you're the first legal, justice system professional to contribute to the programme. But very briefly, do you think your view would be shared by a majority of your former colleagues?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. It's a changed job now, but I would like to think so. The job is different now. The fact that you don't contact a guy who's been assaulted so seriously for a week but my final word, my final word to John: keep the faith, mate. Keep the faith.
Top man.
You will get what you need out of this.
Even if you don't currently know what it is that you need, you'll get it. You're a top man, actually, and your empathy shines through. If you didn't hear John's call, well, first of all, you can, of course, listen back later, or you can rewind live radio. But I love that. It doesn't happen very often. Andrew speaking directly to John, who started off this conversation about jury service, which went off in some extremely unexpected and profoundly moving. I know from my inbox how many of you were deeply, deeply touched by Caroline. And Caroline, if you're still listening, I want you to know that every single person who's commented on your call, and there are hundreds, came from a place of support, empathy, and even love. Something which I suspect you're in need of at the moment. 12 noon is the time. Won't be a lot of love in the House of Commons in the next 20 minutes or so, because PMQs is upon us, and Natasha Clark is here to tell us exactly what is likely to happen.
I was hoping you were going to use that exact segue into this next section of the show, James.
It's not as easy as I make it look.
It's not, but I'm glad I sort of predicted in my head where we were going to go. But yes, not a lot of love, I'm sure, on the backbenches for Keir Starmer. They are a little bit nervous, I think, some of the MPs, about Prime Minister's questions today. Obviously, bearing in mind what we saw last week, and we've just seen Rachel Reeves arrive on the front bench. Keir Starmer today, obviously, will be paying a bit more. She looks a lot better. I can say that because I'm a woman, so it's okay. But yes, I think Keir Starmer, and he admitted basically that he didn't see what was happening in Prime Minister's questions last week with Rachel Reeves when she was visibly upset. He'll be, I'm sure, paying a bit more attention to his MPs around him in his front bench this week. But yes, he's obviously hosting President Macron this week. He had that pretty historic address yesterday in the House of Commons. Been speaking to some MPs this morning. A lot of them were quite impressed by that speech, actually, and would like to see a little bit more of that sparkle dust, impassioned enthusiasm from the Prime Minister when he gives his next address. Should be interesting to watch too.
We all have our skill sets. So what do we think that Mrs. Badenoch may bring up? Mrs. Badenoch may bring up.
Mrs. Badenoch, yes. So a few things.
Her husband went to my school. Did you know that?
Did he?
Yeah.
Did he? I've met him once at a drinks reception. I thought he was very impressive.
I found that out the other day.
Very nice guy.
She said something about what school I went to once. I can't remember when. I thought, what's she interested in my school for? Now I know why.
Now you know.
Obviously, he's been boasting about having gone to the same school as me. So what is she likely? What is she likely to come up with today?
I messaged one person earlier today, and they messaged back. It's the economy, stupid.
Right.
That big OBR report that we had yesterday, talking about the precariousness of the public finances and how fragile it seems that most economists think that it is at the moment. And the government, of course, got a big black hole to fill ahead of the budget. Of course, we heard from Rachel Reeves last week about just how much pressure she's under. I wonder if that might be something that Kemi Badenoch brings up. She seems to see it as a bit of an Achilles heel for the Prime Minister.
She does, doesn't she? But he keeps doing exactly the same thing every time, which is essentially saying...
Liz Truss.
Well, not just Liz Truss, but also 1 year versus 14 years as a responsibility for the fiscal situation that the country finds itself in. Yeah. She must think that doesn't play, or it doesn't play with the people that she's terminally following on Twitter, because it's becoming a little boring for listeners, I think. Obviously, Labour could have done a better job, but 1 year versus 14 years isn't an opinion, it's counting.
Sure, but also, what else has she got to go on, really?
Yeah.
Her job
small
is...
boats?
Well, again, you open up the argument of you guys did not solve the small boats crisis either. So,
and of course, our inability to return people to France, as some have mentioned this week, is a direct consequence of Brexit, which none of them talk about.
Sure, and if Keir Starmer can get some sort of deal to take some of those migrants back to France, as many MPs I was speaking to earlier are hoping that will be secured with France this week, that might be something.
Doctors' strike.
That's also another one.
Let's find out.
Mr. Speaker, can I echo the Prime Minister's sentiments about the horrific terrorist attack of July the 7th? I was pleased to be at the commemoration service on Monday, and in particular, our thoughts are with the families of those who lost their lives, those who had to go on without their loved ones. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to pay tribute to Lord Tebbit, who died yesterday at the age of 94. He was a man of iron integrity and conviction, who by his efforts helped to save our country from the chaos of the 1970s. Yeah. We all owe him so much. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, in their manifesto last year, Labour promised not to increase income tax, not to increase national insurance, and not to increase VAT. Does the Prime Minister still stand by his promises?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, it is rare. it is rare that he's able to give a clear answer, but I'm glad that he has done so, because he also promised, in fact, he boasted that he solved the doctor strike. But only a prime minister who was so weak and giving 28% pay rise to doctors, only now we see that they're still voting to strike again. He folds in every negotiation and claims that it is a triumph. Yes, he does. And we saw at the budget, Mr. Speaker, more promises. The Chancellor promised that she would lift the freeze on income tax and national insurance thresholds because, in her words, they hurt working people. Is that still government policy?
Mr. Speaker, no Prime Minister or Chancellor is going to write a budget in advance. We are absolutely fixed on our fiscal rules. We remain committed to them. We remain committed to our budget, to our manifesto commitments. I realise that sticking to your fiscal rules and your manifesto commitments is a bit unfamiliar to the party opposite, but it's because of the decisions the Chancellor took, that this government has taken, that we can update the House. £120 billion of inward investment into this country since we took office. Business confidence at a 9-year high. That's longer than the Leader Opposition has been in Parliament. Deloitte this week saying the UK is now the best place to invest, creating 384,000 jobs. What a contrast to the mess that we inherited from the party opposite.
Mr. Speaker, there was no clear answer there. The whole House would have heard him fail to rule out freezing tax thresholds. He could say it in the first question, he could promise, but he couldn't this time round. But what does this mean, Mr. Speaker? He's talking about record investment and more jobs. We know that people are losing their jobs. Unemployment has gone up under Labour every single month since it's their year in office. But what does it mean on this issue of tax thresholds? It means that under Labour, millions of our poorest pensioners face being dragged into income tax for the first time ever. Does the Prime Minister think it is right that struggling pensioners should face a retirement tax?
Mr. Speaker, for a Prime Minister or Chancellor to say we're not going to write a budget in advance isn't a Labour thing or a Tory thing. Every single Prime Minister and Chancellor says they won't. We will stick to our manifesto commitments. We will stick to our fiscal rules. This is a language they don't understand, which is why I have to... That's what got us into the problem in the first place. And whilst she comes here every week to talk the country down, that investment, record investment, £120 billion, that will be good, well-paid jobs across the country. And this investment, Mr. Speaker, is foreign investors who can choose whether to invest in this country. They're choosing to invest in this country now because they have confidence in what this government is doing.
Mr. Speaker, investors are fleeing the country. They're fleeing the country. He says he sticks to his manifesto promises. They promised not to put a tax on working people, and then we got the jobs tax. And all we have seen is jobs disappearing. Before the election, the Prime Minister promised, and I quote, "not a penny more on your council tax." The Institute for Fiscal Studies says that now council tax bills will rise at their fastest rate in 20 years. Will the Prime Minister admit that under him, council tax is set to soar?
No, of course it's not. It soared under the last government. But, Mr. Speaker, here she goes again, back on familiar territory. She comes here complaining about the national insurance rise every year, every week. She comes here complaining about it. And then when she's asked the question, well, would you have the courage then to reverse it? What's the answer? No! And I'll tell you for why. Because she's too embarrassed to say she doesn't want the investment we put in. That investment went to the NHS. They want the investment, they can't say how they're going to pay for it. That is what got us into the problem in the first place.
Mr. Speaker, he still doesn't understand, so I'm going to make it very simple for him. This is a mess of his own making. He shouldn't be asking how we would clean it up. The fact is, they raise national insurance through the jobs tax, and that's why they have to put up council tax. The truth is, his catastrophic budget has created a domino effect which he cannot now control. We on this side of the House know that you cannot tax your way to growth. But now he's flirting. They're all muttering. I remember that budget. They were laughing and cheering. They had no idea the mess that they were creating. They should go and explain to their constituents about why unemployment is going up. But, Mr. Speaker, what is more worrying is that now he's flirting with Neil Kinnock's demand for a wealth tax. Let's be honest about what that means. This is a tax on all of our constituent savings, on their houses, on their pensions. It would be a tax on aspiration. Will the Prime Minister rule this out?
Mr. Speaker says we shouldn't be asking them for advice on the economy. She's absolutely right about that. We will not be asking for their advice. What we did in the budget was stabilise the economy through the measures taken by the Chancellor. And what has that led to? 4 interest rate cuts. For mortgage holders, that's hugely important. Compare and contrast what happened to the Liz Truss mini-budget. The fastest growth in the G7 in the first quarter of this year. Wages up more in the first 10 months of a Labour government than the 10 years under the Tories. So, no, we don't need lessons from them.
Mr. Speaker, he says he stabilised the economy. Has he spoken to any farmers recently? Yes. It is time for him to take responsibility for the mess he is making. He has been in office for a year, and all we see is him congratulating himself on what a fantastic job that he has done. Nobody out there believes it. No, not even them. Not even them. What a weak chair. Mr. Speaker, he's congratulating himself. We can compare records. He talks about the fastest growing economy. We left him the fastest growing economy of the G7. We cut the deficit in every year until the pandemic. We got inflation down to 2%. On his watch, taxes are up. Unemployment is up. Inflation is up. And this weak Prime Minister has been forced into a series of chaotic U-turns. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the OBR said that our economy is being eroded under Labour. Doctor strikes, tax bombshells, the wealthy leaving in droves. Isn't the truth that under him he is dragging us back to the 1970s?
Mr. Speaker, responsibility. We're responsible for 4 million extra appointments in the NHS. We're responsible for a 10-year plan on the future of the NHS after they broke it. We're also responsible for free school meals being rolled out in a way which has never been done by anyone. Breakfast clubs being rolled out, family hubs being rolled out, transport across the country, and migration coming down. We take responsibility and we're proud of that.
Lloyd Hatton. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Eden project in Cornwall, it's a proven success story, injecting millions into the local economy. And in Lancashire, Eden Morecambe will soon be under construction, set to create hundreds of jobs. So, it's about time we had the third instalment with Memo Portland, or Eden Portland, as many like to call it. This will be a world-class attraction, celebrating the Jurassic Coast and transforming the economy in South Dorset. So will the Prime Minister back this exciting project and work with me and all of the relevant ministers to secure funding to deliver this project? And ideally, can we use the new Growth Mission Fund?
Well, look, I thank him for highlighting this exciting proposal, and he's a fantastic advocate for Portland and South Dorset. The Eden Portland is a hugely exciting project. I can't confirm funding allocations yet, Mr. Speaker, but our £240 million Growth Mission Fund should support transformative projects that give local leaders real investment to deliver real change. And I know he makes a compelling case in relation to the fund that's been set out.
Sir Ed David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself and my party with the Prime Minister's comments about the horrifying terrorist bombings of 7/7 here in London? Our thoughts are with the victims, their families, and our amazing emergency services. And can I also join in the condolences to the family of Lord Tebbit? He was a man of service in the RAF, in politics, and as a carer for his wife, Margaret. He will be greatly missed. Mr. Speaker, after years of Conservative neglect, the special education needs system is in desperate need of repairs. But with parents understandably worried, we already hear Labour MPs planning another rebellion. So can I offer the Prime Minister this? If he genuinely wants to fix the problem and not strip away the rights of children and parents in some cost-cutting exercise, then we have 72 votes to help. Will the Prime Minister look at the 5 tests for SEND reform we have published today and work with us to make it happen?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's telling that when he raises the question of the broken SEND system, they laugh at the back of the Tory boxes. They laugh. That's how seriously they take their responsibility. Absolute shame. But as he knows, every week across the House, people raise this issue with me. I think it's been raised more times than anything else. And everyone knows the system is broken. And again, guess who broke it along with everything else? It doesn't work for parents and it lets down children. So we do need to reform and change it. That's not about saving money. We've already invested an additional £1 billion into SEND, but it is about creating a new system that truly supports every child. And we're developing proposals. We want to work with parents and teachers to get this right, and I would expect him to welcome that.
Sir Ed Davey.
Well, I thank the Prime Minister for his reply. We want to work across the House to fix the mess that they live. We don't want another welfare-style mess this time. We've got to fix this properly for parents and children. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative government badly undermined the security of our borders by ripping up the returns agreement that allowed us to send migrants back to Europe. So I hope the Prime Minister can secure a new returns agreement with France that acts as a real deterrent to stop the votes. And the Conservatives also sent hundreds of millions of pounds to France and got nothing in return. Does the Prime Minister agree that any new funding to the French government must be conditional on them agreeing a returns deal and doing their bit to stop the votes?
Mr. Speaker, we're working closely with the French on this issue. We'll only provide funding that delivers for our priorities. We are working closely. We share information to a much greater extent than was the case before. We've got a new specialist intelligence unit at Dunkirk, and we're the first government to persuade the French to review their laws and tactics on the North Coast to take more effective action. I'll be discussing this at meetings with President Macron both today and tomorrow.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of
it's 17 minutes after 12. A brief hiatus, and then we will pick over the carcass of what you just heard. It's 12:17.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Chris speaks for many. Can't we give 5 questions to Ed Davey and 2 to Kemi Badenoch? Chris, that's not very nice. She's getting better every week. 19 minutes after 12 is the time. But just a quick word on the last hour of the programme. I nearly said to you, I'm one of the few people that's actually met them, that I wish the secret barrister's identity wasn't secret, because they would be a wonderful guest on conversations like the one we just had about jury service. But they have added, as you would expect, on Blue Sky to the conversation we had, a point that I missed. To understand the context of Sir Brian Levison's call for restricting jury trial, look at the terms of reference. The government wouldn't let him recommend increased funding. So it's a bit like demanding a solution to starvation that doesn't include getting hold of more food. That is important, and I'll post the link to the independent review of criminal courts that allows you to actually see the terms of reference for the report, because you won't see them, and this isn't even a criticism, but you won't see them in any of the news coverage today. 20 minutes after 12 is the time. Where to begin? It's not often you get a one-word answer.
Yeah,
I'm not sure she was expecting it.
No, she wasn't. But actually, it's funny, I'm not quite sure why she's asking the Prime Minister on this, because he has repeatedly said, yes, I will keep to that promise that I made in the manifesto not to increase tax, income tax, VAT, national insurance for the remainder of the Parliament.
No money back, no guarantee.
Yeah. But look, I don't quite see why she keeps asking that one. I do see why she's trying to press him on tax generally, but he has already said repeatedly that he will honour that promise. It's interesting, the contrast, though, between him saying that and him agreeing to talk about tax in that respect, but he won't talk about a wealth tax. He won't talk about whether he'll keep the income tax threshold freeze. Those are something, the latter is something that Labour promised to do before the election. They've gone very quiet about that one. It cost them a lot of money. They're saying that from 2028 onwards, they want to change those income tax thresholds.
But they're tax cuts, aren't they? Freezes of thresholds in real terms.
Yeah, exactly.
You're paying a smaller proportion of your income.
Exactly, and more and more people, as wages go up, and the Labour government, and you heard Keir Starmer just there talk about the fact that wages are going up, Great news, of course, but more and more people being dragged into higher and higher tax brackets. You know, we talk about doctors, nurses, teachers being dragged into those higher tax brackets, and they're making people feel worse off over time. Fiscal drag, it's not very sexy, but it affects a lot of people, and they can't say whether they're going to
the wealth tax,
do anything about
it. They'd have ruled that out at one point, certainly in opposition. Don't be ridiculous, of course. Interesting to see the polling on it as well from YouGov yesterday. Very broad support for it. Interesting, but perhaps not surprising to hear Kemi Badenoch parroting this discredited research, claiming that there's been some sort of millionaire exodus, because that's landing well with the right. But interesting that they're not ruling that. None of them are.
I mean, I think they're keeping that as an option on the table.
They are.
Definitely. But look, what do you mean by a wealth tax? And of course, Neil Kinnock had a specific idea.
Well, she hadn't read it, because he talked about people with assets in excess of £10 million, and she said that every single one of her constituents would be affected. So
I'm not sure about that one.
Well,
how many rich millionaires are there?
Where is her constituency?
Saffron Walden.
Can we just check that everybody in Saffron Walden is worth in excess of £10 million, please? Otherwise, I'm afraid she's done another boo-boo.
Yeah, but look, you know, the idea of a wealth tax, let's first talk about what it would mean. There are already lots of wealth taxes, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, lots of taxes already exist on the very wealthiest in society. You're right that when you, of course, poll people to say, would you like a wealth tax? Would you like the richest to pay more? Of course, people are going to say yes. But it is interesting, you're right, that this Labour government are refusing to rule that out. I think at this point, 3 or 4 months out before the budget, it's fair enough to not talk about it, not to rule anything in, not to rule anything out. But you are completely right. Before, they would have said, we're not interested in that sort of thing. In fact, the Chancellor just a few months ago in an interview with, I think it was The Telegraph, said, I am not interested in a wealth tax. But the economy not doing fantastically well. And of course, she's got a few more £1 billion to find. I think she needs to keep all options on the table. I think we're in for a long summer of what tax speculation could look like and where she might look to try and plug that hole.
Lord save us all. Did the Reform UK benches look a bit thinner than usual?
Well, they
haven't lost another MP, have they?
Sorry, is it 20% now or 40%?
40% of MPs elected at large, which, to be fair, is probably quite a good record compared to what's happened to councils. But
they did gain one extra. So where does that stand?
Yes, the chap who was incarcerated for kicking his ex-girlfriend's head in, but that wasn't enough to get him thrown out of the party, is now elected to resign from the party. To resign the whip.
I didn't realise you could resign the whip until this weekend, voluntarily, but apparently you can.
Has it ever happened before?
I'm not sure, and definitely not in the Reform Party, because they've obviously not had enough MPs to do so, but
so this is James McMurdoch, the MP for South Basildon and East Thurrock, conveniently going independent, which of course means that only he will get to decide whether or not the constituents ever get another by-election before the next general election, and he will continue to draw his salary until then.
It's tough to get rid of an MP without them being found guilty of some sort of impropriety. And he is, of course, facing an investigation currently within the party. I think the Labour Party have referred him to the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner to see whether there is a case to answer here. But yes, it could be weeks, potentially months before anything is found in his favour or against him.
Of one thing we can be certain. If there is any wrongdoing, or if it turns out to have been an appalling appointment, it will have absolutely nothing to do with the chap who leads the party.
No, definitely not. I didn't vet them. I didn't vet them.
Clean. And I believe they're lowering the standards for vetting now. They're saying to people who've previously been rejected, why don't you apply again?
For the Reform Party or for other parties?
But just for Reform, because the track record of the people who got onto the ballot is so sparkling. But we digress. The doctor strike works a bit, I think. Public opinion is going to be different this time round from what it was last time round, as far as I can tell, and for good or for ill. There are points to be landed there.
Yeah, I think
she land them?
Yeah, no, because actually she didn't spend much time talking about the junior doctor strikes. But equally, I guess the government have a very strong argument in, well, we solved those junior doctor strikes. We gave them the pay rise that they wanted. We are seeing an increase in NHS appointments. Waiting lists are dropping. They've got a good story to tell here. However, if these resident doctors do go on strike, it's going to erase completely their argument here, and they'll be in a real hot water about it, I think.
Which oddly works both ways, because it makes some people think, well, they shouldn't do it then, because the BMA should want a government that is more sympathetic to their cause than the alternatives. But equally, it makes them think, well, now's the time to go for them, because we can really do them damage.
Yeah,
that's the double-edged sword of industrial action, isn't it?
And it also might have a bit of a blowback on the government as well, because the BMA, the public might go, oh, are this government just the same as the last government? They're not going to be giving pay rises out. We think they deserve it. I think you're right in what you talk about public opinion. It doesn't feel like the sort of momentum is with doctors going on strike again. In fact, most of the polling shows that most people don't support them to do so again. So they might be barking up a tree, which... so I'm not sure where this analogy is going here. They might not be able to. They might not be able to.
That's very honest of you.
Yeah, they might not be able to galvanise that public support for going on strike again. So it might not work for them. But yeah, the problem is though, like I say, if they do, they risk eroding all of the progress they've made on NHS waiting lists, and that is something I think everybody can agree. The first year of this Labour government has been a huge win on the NHS. Things are finally starting to turn around a little bit there.
And he did a better job this week of pointing out some of these wins and some of this progress than he has.
He should be doing that every week. It should be his final answer every week, going, I've done this, and this. And yeah, I think he is getting a little bit better about sort of triumphing some of the wins and combating some of that negativity.
I've had an important message. Hi James, we're currently in the process of buying a house in Saffron Walden and would like to confirm that we do not have £10 million in assets. However, I am planning on lowering the tone of the neighbourhood as soon as I arrive. Thank you. Well, good luck.
We also saw, we should mention the Prime Minister pulling the Liz Truss button yet again. Is that always going to be Keir Starmer's answer on the economy? Because I don't think it can be forever. I think, Kemi Badenoch does make a point here when she's saying, you have been in power for a year. Understandably, of course, you can always blame. It's going to take a long time to turn around 14 years of the Tories. Of course it will. But Keir Starmer does need to start moving on, I think, at some point from that narrative, don't you think?
I don't know.
How long is it there down to start talking about?
Well, it depends how heavily your mortgage was affected by it. If you lost your house, I don't think you'll ever get bored of hearing them. Be pointed out that Liz Truss was personally responsible for it, and that all the people cheerleading for Kemi Badenoch and indeed opposed to the wealth tax told you that Liz Truss was going to be brilliant. So you would have the Telegraph, you'd have the Sun, you'd have the Daily Mail, you'd have Nigel Farage, you'd have all of her colleagues in Parliament all claiming that this was the finest fiscal event since sliced bread. And the reason why you remind people of Liz Truss's disastrous tenure is because all of those people are still in their jobs.
Yeah, and we don't want to go back to those days.
Also, you don't want to trust them next time they tell you to do something like, I don't know, vote for Brexit, put Boris Johnson in Parliament, support austerity, or greet Liz Truss with a big round of applause and a red carpet. Just me thinking out loud that. I don't know. Maybe some people are bored of having it pointed out that a Tory Prime Minister with the full support of a parliamentary party led the government to the very edge, led the entire country to the very edge of financial oblivion. But anyway, to be fair to the Tories, it's not like they were bringing up Labour's track record at the last general election 14 years after Labour were in power.
Totally crazy, and I completely agree that to just move on, don't do it. But
and when did the Tories stop hitting the Corbyn button?
That's true. No, true. But I don't think it works because I don't think that the
PMQs, it's not real life, is it?
True, but I don't think that the Prime Minister has got enough of a sound economic argument, ideology, credibility to be saying, look, the economy is under so much better since we took over. We've stabilised the public finances. People don't feel better off, and until they start to, I think that it is going to continue to be a bit of an Achilles heel for the Prime Minister on the economy. Keir Starmer's not really a numbers economist guy, is he? He's leaving most of it to Rachel Reeves to sort out, and at the moment it's not going fantastically well.
And one thing we can say with supreme confidence is that Rachel Reeves ain't going anywhere anytime soon.
Absolutely not. Well, you saw the reaction to the idea that Keir Starmer didn't fully back her at last week's Prime Minister's Questions when he had the opportunity to, soon rowing completely back on that. But yeah, she ain't going anywhere.
Natasha Clark, many thanks. We haven't talked about Ed Davey at all.
His good questions on Send. Yeah, yes. That's something.
Why did everyone start jeering? Was that because he was in government for some of the period?
Were they jeering him out
critiquing?
when he was talking about small boats, or were they jeering him about Send? I'm not sure what exactly he said that prompted that.
I presume because he was in the coalition government, so he doesn't really get to. I don't know, but it's all a lot of rear-view mirror at PMQs, isn't there? Perhaps inevitably, perhaps a bit too much.
But yeah, he's talked today about the government. He's basically saying that we will vote for Send reform he's set out 5 ways that Liberal Democrats would like to see that reform. I think that's occupying a lot of MPs' postbags at the moment. But even Ed Davey, we didn't mention this point. Even Ed Davey says that the money being spent on small boat crossings in France is not enough, which I thought was a really interesting move from him.
Yeah, I thought that as well, and we should have left aside a bit more time to talk about it.
Next time we'll talk about Ed Davey we should talk about him for 10 minutes and Kemi Badenoch for 5. How about that?
Give him 5.
I think we should do that.
Questions. Anyway, let's have the headlines now with Amelia Cox.
James O'Brien on LBC.
34 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A couple of cracking guests for you this Wednesday. I like this new little tradition that has been established in recent months, when we come off the back of PMQs and instead of trying to resurrect a phone-in that's effectively finished or start a new one in the unsatisfactory amount of time available, we start looking for things that that you will be interested in and that you may not yet be aware of. So coming at 12:45, we'll be joined by the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist James Boyle to talk us through the latest Nazification of Elon Musk's social media platform, which it strikes me is something that my guest this quarter would probably have something to say about, but that is not where she has decided to direct her energies in her first book. Lara Lewington, you will know from various broadcasting roles, most obviously the BBC's flagship technology show Click, or possibly as the AI agony aunt on ITV's Lorraine.
Everyone needs one.
What?
Everyone needs one.
Everyone needs an agony aunt, particularly an AI agony aunt, increasingly so. But for your first book, Lara, Hacking Humanity, you've elected to look at the impact technology is having and will have upon health. Of all the things you could have talked about, of all the things you could have written about, of all the areas of expertise that you have in tech, why did you pick this? Because I suppose to people outside that world, it is the social media madness that's seems most urgent and most interesting.
Possibly. I think there's a lot of areas you can take on, but we are at the point of transformation in how we approach health. And I think that's both from a personal perspective. We can be empowered to track our health better, to understand more about it. And also, we know the impact that lifestyle has, sleep, exercise, what we eat, but now we can quantify it better than ever. We are also at the point where healthcare systems can realistically start to approach prevention. It's the coming together of a lot of different scientific advancement and AI. We are supercharging what's possible here.
And you're not a politician, so when you say it, we can actually pay attention, because we've had a long queue of politicians saying AI is going to change everything, and then when you ask them questions, it turns out they may not actually know much about the detail. You are the opposite. This is. And we've been talking about the pill a lot lately. The Ozempic. I think you write about it.
I do, yeah.
And the idea that might appear to be too good to be true, and then evidence begins to emerge that perhaps it isn't. It is possible for revolutionary change to take place. Your thesis is that it will be lots of different things happening at the same time.
Yeah, well, I think that's what it is. It's not 1, 2, 3 things. It's many, many different areas. We are at the point where we can bring together genomic information.
What does that mean?
So as we learn more about our genetics, we know more about what our risks are. Now, there's a lot that isn't genetic. Lifestyle has an absolutely enormous influence on our health. But these are all pieces of the puzzle. And AI allows us to bring together all of this data, our lifestyle, our genetic information, our disease risk based on our ethnicity, where we live, so many different factors. And as we learn more and the AI crunches more of the data, we understand who is at risk when, which means that we can predict better, we can screen better earlier, we can diagnose earlier. Sometimes we'll be able to prevent, but when we can't, earlier diagnosis will mean better and kinder treatment.
What do you say to slightly odd people who would rather not know?
Well, I think this is a very relevant point for a lot of this. Now, if you were to find out you were going to die at 50 and there was nothing you could do about it, you might not want to know.
Yeah.
If there was something you could do about it, you would. And increasingly, there will be more that we can do about these things that we find out. Back in, it was around 2005, it cost $3 billion to sequence the first person's genome. Now we can all do it for a few £100. How useful is it now? Well, there are a few bits of actionable information. Genomics England is doing a really interesting project with newborns where they're looking at newborns who have a high risk of rare disease. Rare diseases are actually quite common. 1 in 17 of us has one. And for these children, there's something actionable there going on. It can prevent blindness, for example, being able to diagnose early. Whereas right now, for most of us, that information isn't hugely useful and we may panic because there's also low confidence in a lot of it. But as we learn more about the science, as the AI manages to break down more of what that risk means for who, when, it will become more useful, even in terms of what medicines will or won't work for us.
So most obviously, you've got quality of life and life expectancy expanding exponentially. You've got lower bills for the health service because we will be looking more at prevention than cure. Are you dismayed by the speed of progress or the lack of speed of progress, or do you feel that things are more or less moving at the kind of rate they should be moving?
I think this is very difficult because we need to make sure that things are safe and effective and used correctly. There's something in the NHS which is often referred to by people in the health tech world as pilotitis, which is there are a lot of pilots that take place, often very successfully, but it doesn't result in rollout. Right now, Right now, we have a huge discrepancy between health span and lifespan. For women in England, 25% of their lives is spent in what's considered poor health. For men, 20%. What we really need to work at here, what the real focus can be, is closing that gap. And that's what I look at in the book.
Well, what else do you look at in the book? Who is it aimed at, and what do they get from it? So, will they be as informed as you are on what the future is likely to look like and what the current state of play is, or will they come away with ideas about improving their own lives, or both?
I think it's a book filled with hope, actually, and there are these two sides to it of what we can do to empower ourselves, how we can better look after ourselves, and how we separate science from snake oil. There are so many fad diets, so many things we're constantly hearing that aren't always rooted in science. So I've got 1,500 citations from medical papers, 66 interviews.
There are a lot of notes in the back of this book. I mean, it does, and that's obviously something that's very important to you, partly because, as you say, to distinguish between proper science and quack science, but also to establish that this is a book that should be filed on the science shelves and not the sort of self-help genre.
Definitely. This is based on real deep science, and it's based on the latest cutting-edge science. We know that science changes. I'm not suggesting that all science is going to remain the same forever, but this is where we are now. This is where scientific understanding is. This is what is becoming possible. We are at the beginning of understanding so much about impact of lifestyle, of genetics, so many different factors, and we are heading in a direction of travel which is really full of hope.
Goodness knows we could do with some hope, and it's in all sorts of areas, some of them obvious: cancer, heart disease, dementia, some of them less so, growing organs for transplant. What are you singularly most excited about?
I think the transformations in cancer prediction, diagnosis and treatment are going to be huge. When writing a book like this, I felt like I needed to be incredibly sensitive to anybody whose life has already been affected, anybody who is currently going through cancer or any other condition that's in there. And
because you don't want to say, oh, bad luck, you've missed this particular bus.
Well, and this is a really difficult point because what is happening in the future of cancer is going to be utterly transformative. And I spoke to so many experts and they all talk about the same direction of travel. But unfortunately, it's not going to be soon enough for everyone.
Right. Why don't we see more of this in day-to-day journalism? I mean, in a way, it's great for you because it's left a huge, whopping great hole for your book to fill. But you talk about hope. I flick through the papers every day and there ain't much hope in them.
Indeed. I can't answer the question why people aren't talking about it, but what I can say is that over the last 2 years, pretty much every interview I have ever done has focused on, should we be scared? Let's talk about fear over AI.
You're exactly right.
And this is the antithesis to that. This is why we built this thing. AI is going to have enormous power and promise, and I really just wanted to tell that story.
What do you do, if that's not too personal a question, that possibly might raise eyebrows in terms of your own life expectancy or quality of life? Do you do anything, because it's so science-based, do you do anything that outwardly looks a bit woo but turns out not to be a point?
No, not really. I run 5 kilometres most days. I try and eat healthily. I don't have much sugar and I don't really drink alcohol.
Okay.
And that's it.
You don't have any implants or anything?
I don't have any implants. I have various wearables that
I can
that's just
keeping track of your health stuff.
But I actually think the fact that I don't do anything extreme is probably quite good in supporting the thesis.
That's why I asked.
Because I'm not into doing anything that is so extreme that it disrupts your life and stops your enjoyable day-to-day living. And I do speak to Brian Johnson, the tech entrepreneur who's spending millions trying to reverse his biological age.
I was about to ask you about him. Well, I mean, because he's the polar opposite of what you describe.
Well, yes, and there are little bits of what he does that I find really interesting.
This is the guy, for people who don't know, who he spends a lot of time... Can I say this on the radio? He spends a lot of time talking about the quality of his erection.
He tracks them at night. Yeah, he's got a tracking device, a wearable.
Thank you.
Anyway, moving on from that, he also fasts 19 hours a day.
Yes.
He takes about 50 supplements a day. He gets up to all sorts. He looks like he's going to
What if
burst
he's right
whilst he's
and
doing
we're
those
all wrong?
workouts. Then he'll outlive us all. Or he'll choke on a pill. He thinks he'll die an ironic death.
Well, we hope no one dies an ironic death, or indeed an early death. And you paint a picture of a world in which the latter, at least, would become considerably more avoidable.
Yeah, and someone else I speak to in the book is 103-year-old Mildred, who sadly last week I learned had just passed away. But when I interviewed her, which was last year, she had had enough. She felt she'd lived her life. She'd set up hospitals in Uganda. She'd lived a really important, busy, powerful life. But at 103, she didn't have any disease. She wasn't actually ill, but she'd lost her daughter 30 years before. She felt she had no purpose. Every time she stood up, she was scared she was going to fall over. And it really raises the questions over what we want out of life. What is health span? There's a lot in that picture. It's not just being free of disease. It's actually having all of those other pieces, companionship and purpose.
Well, yes, and hope, of course, which you've mentioned as being the driving force in the book. Did you enjoy writing it, Lara?
Very much so. I thought writing a book could be quite an isolated job,
yes,
but it turned out it wasn't. 66 interviews later.
because you did the travelling and the contact.
Well, yes,
and crucially learning from people.
Well, that was it. And a lot of the travelling I did was making TV documentaries. So a lot of that was sort of done separately, albeit also written up in the book. But I also spoke to some of the most fascinating people in the world, because the fact that you can do this so easily on a video call these days meant I could really pick and choose the best people to speak to. And those conversations were amazing. The takeaways from them all, they were just incredible. So it was a fascinating process.
I love the phrase reshape our genetic destinies. How receptive are governments to what you're preaching?
Well, what we heard last year about the 10-year plan is obviously really exciting news. Last week, sorry, did I say last year? I meant last week. Right, it's obviously really
just don't want people to get confused about
no, exactly.
You wait ages for a 10-year plan to come along and then you get...
Exactly, it was just me talking nonsense. But I think that is really important that we're heading in that direction, even in terms of the wearables. And I often get asked the question of, but what about not everyone can afford wearables, not everyone can... Well, look, they are in that plan. The idea is that in 10 years' time, people who are leaving acute treatment in hospital or for prevention or also to monitor chronic conditions will be provided with wearables. So there is so much in that plan, which is what's in the book, only the book is really an explainer of what this means for you, me, for everyone, and when it's plausible, and the challenges that come with it. There are many sensitivities over data, I know that.
And politically, that's one of the holy grails, isn't it? Is persuading the public that short-term expenditure will involve enormous savings in the long term, so it becomes financially
There are often
irresistible.
different pots of money as well, so there are various challenges, and that's in the UK with a single-payer system. You look at the system in the US, and there are enormous challenges to make this a reality, because the insurers, who people would hope might pay for the preventative investigations...
They've got shareholders to look after.
Yes, and also they're not necessarily going to benefit at the point someone doesn't get sick, because people are constantly moving insurers. So around the world there are various different challenges.
Gosh, there's a lot in there, but I think, as you've mentioned, the biggest message is, well, anybody who just wants to think, hey, do you know what, the future might actually be all right. It might actually be better than the present. Maybe the curve of human evolution has not gone into free fall or reverse. Maybe our children will in many ways have better lives than us.
I think there is incredible promise, and we just need to understand how it works. We need to understand who we're giving our data to, how it's being looked after, to what ends, so the conversation isn't just about fear, because there's incredible possibility here.
Great title too. Hacking Humanity, How Technology Can Save Your Health and Your Life is out tomorrow. But it's probably already in bookshops. I bet you've checked.
I might have done.
Have you? Is it a nice feeling? Well,
it is a nice feeling, and of course I didn't move the book from the position it was in to somewhere else.
No, that would be outrageous. Lara Lewington, thank you. It's 12:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
1 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we turn our attention next to a story that has an air of grim inevitability to it. Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot, staying with AI-related matters, actually, repeatedly praised... Shall I do a missing word round, actually? What do you think the missing words are in this? So Elon Musk, who not long ago was the finest thing since sliced bread for many people to the extreme right of UK politics, let alone US, but has subsequently fallen out with Donald Trump. Elon Musk's artificial intelligence chatbot repeatedly praised blank on Tuesday? Oh, I'll tell you, Adolf Hitler. It also shared anti-Semitic rhetoric of the kind that we probably haven't seen in public since the 1930s. This just the day before his AI company plans to release its latest model. I need a little help with stories like this because my brain is full of analogue. So I haven't fully embraced the digital. James Ball has. He is a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and the political editor of The New World, which is, as you know, because Matt Kelly, his editor, was here last week telling us that is the latest evolution of the New European, and it's brilliant. The front page article about Gaza in the latest issue should be absolutely required reading for everybody covering the issue in slightly higher profile national news. So, James, I mean, in your own words, how bad was this?
This was pretty bad. This wasn't a sort of passing reference or a joking Hitler made the trains run on time kind of thing. This AI model, and bear in mind, it's churning out text. It's just reproducing what it's programmed to do. But it fully endorsed the Holocaust in multiple replies. It started a wordplay game to try and spell out the N-word. It called out sort of multiple Jewish conspiracy theories, and it started asking to be referred to as Mecca Hitler.
But apart from that,
other than that, it was fine. Yes, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
This is extraordinary. So
this is not lefties being snowflakes. It fully embraced the Holocaust and Nazi agenda.
And this is what I was sort of alluding to a moment ago when I talked about not being qualified to navigate waters like this on my own. That key word in what you just said is programmed. So this is a consequence of human interaction. This is a consequence of human influence.
Yes, and we can say that with a bit of confidence. There's 3 levels of programming with AI. There's the training, which is where you feed in millions and millions of articles, loads of stuff, all of that kind of stuff. And that's what raises concerns about copyright theft and all of that. That's the core of the model.
Yeah.
There's then something called fine-tuning. And you put in a bunch of specialist content, a lot less of it, and say, pay lots of attention to this, model yourself on this. And then there's something called the system prompt. So before you ask an AI a question, there's like a secret extra couple of sentences of questions that it sees beforehand. And for something like a normal AI model, this says, balance your answer, try not to repeat yourself, make sure that you don't swear, make sure that you don't do other things.
So it's a bit like the role that Eleanor plays on this radio programme.
Exactly that. It's the producer.
It's good to know. And that means that carry on.
Now, the thing that we know is that Grok's system prompt was changed. That little secret coding, that coding it gets that you don't see, it had added in, and I quote, assume subjective viewpoints sourced from the media are biased.
Right.
Now, that got added on July the 6th. Wow. And then the other thing it got told was that it should, quote, not shy away from making claims which are politically incorrect, so long as they are well substantiated. And the combination of telling it not to trust mainstream media and to make politically incorrect claims seems to have been where the change in its behaviour that made it fully embrace the Holocaust happened.
Wow. So
now, the suspicion is some fine-tuning happened. It might have been trained on Elon Musk's tweets. It might have been trained on some of the darker internet forums. There's one called 4chan that a lot of far-right accounts hang out on. But it was purposely changed in a way that led to this behaviour. Because
some of his fanboys were describing Grok as having become too woke?
That's exactly why. It turns out if you train a model on reality, it sometimes doesn't say the answers that
you mean reality has a liberal bias, James?
It seems that way. And so it did things like suggest that cutting FEMA, the US's disaster recovery aid program, or Elon Musk's Doge cuts to weather forecasting may have played a role in the tragedies that have happened in Texas. And that was not liked by some of the Trump fans or the Elon fans. And so they repeatedly complain that Grok is woke when it tells them things they don't like hearing. And Elon keeps trying to fix it. And it results, I don't think Elon wanted it to start denying the Holocaust. No. They did delete those posts. But it turns out that when you try and make it extreme but not too extreme, it's like that old joking post about turning the racism dial to just right.
Yes. And they're struggling to do, well, because obviously there's no such point on the dial. What's the bigger picture? They're not turning it off, are they, the whole thing? Did they turn it off for a while?
No, they turned it off for a while. They've taken out the sentence about making claims that are politically incorrect. I think the thing here is...
What it is, sorry to interrupt, but we're short of time because something was bubbling away in the back of my brain and I couldn't quite pin it down. That's because politically incorrect means bigoted and racist. I mean, we've spent years in this country pretending otherwise. Same with woke, is everyone dressing up, writing articles for The Spectator about how, no, actually, these are just the ordinary concerns of ordinary people. If you tell something to come up with politically incorrect stuff, it will go inevitably to racism, Holocaust denial and weapons-grade anti-Semitism.
Of course it will. And AI doesn't know how to play the games that humans play. It looks at what words correlate together, what runs together, what are the patterns. And it knows that when you look in these forums, when you look in these places, there is at the core of it deep racism, deep sexism, deep homophobia, and it's got to reproduce that. And of course, grinding anti-Semitism, hugely anti-Semitic. But the guy who programs this, the guy behind this, is the world's richest man, a multi-billion-dollar defense contract, and of all the satellites orbiting the Earth, he controls more than half of them. He controls more satellites than the rest of humanity put together. Now, the guy that has just coded Mecha Hitler is the person who has this huge control over space, over the defense industry, over comms. It's Elon that should worry us. It's it's Dr. Frankenstein that's scary, not the monster.
Are his wings clipped at all by his falling out with Donald Trump, do you think?
Yes, I think he's vulnerable, and I think that's why he's lashing out. I think that's why he's worried about the fanboys abandoning him. That's why he's sort of looking like this. If Trump and Musk really fight, Trump will win. He's got the military behind him. He's got the support behind him. He's got the machinery of the US. And so Elon is vulnerable. And I think when people are powerful and panicked, they do things like this. And you can see the unraveling in real time.
And Eleanor wants me to ask if you can remember what you were going to say before I interrupted you. So that's a bit like the AI prompts.
It was to point to Elon being worrying more than Grok doing this. It's abhorrent. I mean, the things it's saying here aren't funny. They are truly grotesque hate speech that is spurring on the worst corners of the internet. But that's a symptom. That's a sideshow. The problem is that this has $10 billion of investment in it because Elon Musk is behind it. I mean, imagine if you are someone who's just put $1 billion in debt to this thing. It's insanity.
And it's not over yet. Thank you for that, James. We may be catching up again at various points in the future, but it's always a pleasure to listen to you, the political editor of The New World and prolific author, James Ball. Many thanks indeed. What a great half an hour. I don't know whether James has just sucked out of the room all the hope that Lara Lewington brought into it, but hey-ho, such is life. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinion. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause live radio, you can rewind live radio, you can listen to a range of podcasts. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.